use, zoning, and housing, public and private. I want to start off with the roll call,
Daenerys.
please.
John.
Present.
Ariadna, present. Alistair.
Yes.
Andrea.
Can we take Andrea off, right?
Yeah,
Or not?
Trevor.
Present.
Laura. Jamie.
Here.
Sandra.
Present.
Steve. Anisha.
So
Clarification, anyone who's on Zoom, are they marked present? Or-
Yeah.
if they're on Zoom, if they're a committee member on Zoom, they're not here, they're absent.
Yep. All right, any changes to the minutes from last month? Nope, here no changes. All right, we're gonna go to our first presentation from about 70 Mulberry Street. Could the people from DDC, DCLA, and Jennifer Ma just identify yourself, and you'll have 20 minutes, 20 minutes to present.
And who's screen sharing so I can promote to?
Yeah, raise your hand. Who's gonna-
Yo-Yo, can you start your presentation?
Yes, I'm going to start the screen sharing. I cannot share my screen. Can someone grant me the access?
Yeah.
Your co-host.
Just share your screen now.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Presentation is ready, right?
Yes, presentation is ready.
Okay. Hi, my name is Xiaoming Zhao, Outreach Coordinator from DDC. Today we have a DDC, DCAS, and DCLA are very excited to share about 70 Mulberry final design and present for our conceptual work. Now I'm turning to my colleague Yo-Yo from Greenshot to start a presentation.
Hi, good evening, everyone. We are I'm Yo-Yo Chen of Grimshaw Architects. We are very excited to share the final design updates with you. Currently, we are at the final phase of the design. We are aiming to wrapping up the construction documentation by the end of January, so in the coming weeks. And then the significant, substantial completion is by the end of 2027. And then a little bit of history of the 70 Mulberry was built as the public school 23, and then back in 1890s. And then the most recent history, level 5 added. And then due to the fire back in 2020, January, currently we have 2 street facade and the stair tower remain. The update of the final design is that we kept the massing strategy. We adjust a little bit of the facade panel with the building system integration, but overall the design you see today, the final design, is in line with what we shared with you earlier. The building integrated photovoltaic panel applied on the facade along with the rooftop PV. The project generates 1/3 of its annual energy consumption. It's quite significantly. And then we like to point out, we kept the current 4 banners along the stair tower. It's going to go with the new branding for this project. And then we incorporate the feedback from the community. We packed our PV panel like closer together, so it has a less visual impact from the street. But overall, the design you see today is in line with what we shared with you earlier. And then here, just the updated view from the corner approach from the Bear Street, and the latest rendering from the nighttime. And I'm going to hand the presentation to David Mandel of DCLA.
Sure. Hi, thank you. Good evening. My name is David Mandel. I'm the community liaison for the Public Art Unit at the Department of Cultural Affairs. Very excited to join you tonight to present an update on the conceptual design for the public artwork component of 70 Mulberry Street. Just wanted to start by introducing that the Percent for Art program considers, public artwork the successful intersection of the public space design of a facility or space, an artist and their professional practice, and the community, ultimately the users, stakeholders, and location where this project will be taking place. Next slide. The Percent for Art program was established by law in 1982. It states that 1% of capital funds for a newly constructed or reconstructed city-owned building is eligible for a permanent work of art. And so that's how this public artwork was incorporated into the project. The Department of Cultural Affairs oversees the Percent for Art program. And the image on the left is from 1985. That's the first Percent for Art project located in East Harlem. The work on the right, the image is of that same artwork standing there today. So these are permanent site-specific works of art that are meant to be durable in the public realm for many years to come, a permanent part of the city's public art collection. Next slide. Since 1985, there have been over 350 public artworks commissioned through the Percent for Art program, representing a wide variety of styles, mediums, and artistic diversity, also in a wide variety of spaces ranging from courthouses to parks, public plazas, libraries, schools, and facilities such as 70 Mulberry tonight. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned before, this project is funded by city capital dollars for the Percent for Art program. The manner in which we commission an artwork, we have a couple of different process. The process for this project was called the Artist-Architect Collaboration. This is where we bring on an artist to essentially be a member of the design team, work very closely to integrate their practice and their vision for the artwork into the design of the building. To select the artist, we conducted a panel meeting as well as a design charrette. First, at a panel meeting, we looked at a pool of about 36 artists under consideration for the project. We looked at their previous works, and then the panel collectively decided to select ultimately 4 artists to invite to come to a design charrette. The design charrette is essentially a very deep, interactive, conversational interview between the artist and design team to discuss their creative practice, working process, and how they would approach this project. Involved in this conversation were also community stakeholders and our panel members, which I'll talk about in a moment. So at the design charrette, which is a transparent process, there were these 4 interviews. Questions were asked amongst the team. Artists submitted responses to follow-up questions. Then there was a group discussion meeting where ultimately Jennifer Wen Ma was selected unanimously for the project. You see the next slide. So the panelist is made up of 2 categories. We have our voting panelists, which is kind of required by that Percent for Art law, where we have representatives from the partner agencies, the design agency, in this case, the Department of Design and Construction, the sponsor agency, Department of Citywide Administrative Services, and then we have 2 arts professionals. We also have our advisory panelists, which consists of representatives of the staff and stakeholders of the architectural design team, agencies, the local electeds, but also neighborhood stakeholders, local arts group, members of the community board, etc. We had a really active and engaged panel for this process. Next slide. This is just an overview of the timeline for the artist selection and kind of where we are in the process of the Percent for Art project. We initially reached out to the community back in January of 2023 when we asked for artist suggestions and suggestions for panelists to participate. We held that was the panel meeting in February 2023, then the design charrette, followed by that community conversation, panel discussion and decision. Following a period of design development, Jennifer has refined her conceptual design, which we are now presenting. We presented it to the advisory committee last week and we're very excited to present it to the community board tonight. In January, we'll be presenting this project to the Public Design Commission at a public hearing, which is for their conceptual design review. Following that approval, the project will move forward past its conceptual phase into preliminary design, which is when it goes into much more detail for engineering, materials, fabrication drawings, and ultimately gets approved for installation. So before I turn it over to Jennifer, I just want to emphasize what you're seeing tonight is what we call the conceptual design. It's really the idea or the artist's approach to the project. And while things may evolve and change over design development based on feedback, cost, materiality, a variety of decisions, what you're seeing is, the vision, the idea, the approach. So this is really what you can expect this artwork to do and how it's going to function in the space. We are hoping, we're requesting a letter of support from the community board that we would love to include with our materials as we go to the Public Design Commission. And we're looking forward to keeping you updated as the project moves forward. So now I'll turn it over to Jennifer, who will introduce herself and her project. Take it away, Jennifer.
Thank
Jennifer,
you.
we've got left, so
So I will just share my screen. Okay, we have very little time. I'll launch right into it. Thank you so much for being here. I'm super excited. The project I want to present for 70 Mulberry Street is called Wings of Everchange, 意之意 for anyone who reads Chinese. Give you a little bit of context, some previous work. My name is Jennifer Wen Ma. I'm a visual artist. I want to work with the double ceiling space in the lobby in the atrium. So I will be suspending a sculpture there. So here I've selected a few images from the past showing that type of work. This large creature in the front is like a butterfly shape. It's about 30 feet in length, which is similar to the size of the work I'm proposing. And this is a permanent installation in Macau. Another suspended piece, this was done in the UK, uses glass, which is a material I really want to work with. And also, I want to point out that for this piece, you see these panels of glass panels on the side with painted images using Chinese ink. That's another material I want to explore in this project. Glass is such a beautiful, ephemeral, and spiritual material. I feel like it's going to play a really special place, special role in this project for 70 Mulberry. I also have experience in performance. This is an installation opera that I conceived and directed and designed. And so working with performative elements is something that's very close to me, to my practice. And this last image from the past is from the Water Cube in Beijing, where I use I Ching, the ancient text, with contemporary technology, cutting edge technology to create these light and moving images on the facade of the building as an ongoing long-term public art piece. Our project site, so it's in the heart of Chinatown. And Yu Yu, my colleague, has already shown the current state of design. The space I am proposing to occupy is in the atrium and in the staircase. So here is a lobby, atrium, and here's a stair tower. That's a section view, and here's a plan view. Wings of Everchange. I'm proposing to create a creature of transformation that becomes the artistic guardian to the building, linking the past to present in an ever-changing process of evolving into the future. I would like to use salvage architectural elements from the burnt site, memories of building occupants encased in time capsules, and their aspirations and wishes for its future. These elements will form the body and the wings of this creature in a state of metamorphosis and becoming. Following the ancient teaching of I Ching, the element of change permeates all aspects of living. This work encourages us to embrace the changes to the building and community and take it towards the future with openness and fluidity. Here is a very early sketch, pencil sketch. So I'm showing several stages of conceptual design. I also want to use the idea of flying white in this project. So the project is presented in 3 parts. It's a sculpture, it's a sculpture in the atrium. It's a drawing, a painting in the stair tower, and then it's also a virtual archive of oral histories. They're linked together by the calligraphic principle of flying white to convey the strong and unbroken sense of community and history that this building represents. So flying white, fei bai, is a technique that creates these eloquent curves and lines by swiftly moving a dry brush across the paper that leaves a streaky or sometimes disconnected strokes. Yet the vitality transferred in the brushwork is so potent that the white spaces contained these transient energy of the artist and the artwork. So that's how I'm proposing to hold the 3 components together in this work. Here is a little bit later on, I created an ink drawing for this creature. I proposed for it to be suspended on the first floor of the double height atrium. And it's in the shape of an abstract mythological creature. It'll be made from metal, glass, and a blend of historical elements from the architecture that's been the burnt site. This will be measuring about 33 feet by 13 by 13. Here is a concept render in Photoshop, putting this work in the backdrop of the interior design. So some of the elements breaking down the sculpture are elevating community voices using words of aspiration. The wings unfurling from the creature's body are shaped after Chinese calligraphic brushworks, using keywords are gathered from the community members on the profound significance of this building and people's aspirations for its future. I've already done a lot of interviews with tenants and community members, and I intend to do a lot more in the coming months to gather these words of inspiration. Some under consideration that will be translated into Chinese are transformation, unity, reunite, community, history, legacy, culture, soar. So here's how I propose to do it. I will first make these writings in calligraphy, and then that will be made into these Rorschach ink blots, which creates a symmetrical form that can be turned into wing-like formation. For example, the word transformation, upper left-hand corner, is bian, and that's in typewritten form. Then in the middle, upper middle is calligraphic form. On the right, upper right is when I turned it into a Rorschach drawing. In this case, it's very legible, but it could also be very abstract, like the lower forms, 3 forms. That's an outline of a more abstract Rorschach drawing of the word transformation. And when it's cut out as sheet metal and stacked, it can take on this wing-like form, for example. And another way of connecting with history is through salvage materials, especially on the backside of the creature. Here you see architectural elements salvaged from the site, some from stair railings to wrought iron posts, to the doorknobs of the public school. These are really beautiful elements that can be incorporated into the sculpture. I also want to use these glass orbs as time capsules that will emit this beautiful warm glow of light that's dotted throughout the creature's body. And then they become interactive time capsules that will chronicle the building's impact and transformation through recorded stories from the community. So tenants and the broader community members will be participants with me in creating these elements of time capsule embers, capturing past, present, and memories of the building occupants and preserving them for the future. I made a small maquette. This is a 1:25 scale. Is just using paper and wire at this point, but ultimately, obviously, the work will be done in metal. It would take very different in form. And here I have not delved into the color and etc., but starting to see how these elements might come together to create this wing-like creature. And this is from the posterior view, from the backside, looking at it. So it's more of a radiating form. So seeing it from different directions will really give different read and different formations of the sculpture. The second component is the ink painting in the stair tower. An energetic continuation of the atrium sculpture in painting form is displayed in the stair tower. On the glass panel of the wind shaft is a long meandering ink painting that spirals up 5 stories. These paintings will be made in my studio. Then the images are reprinted and transferred onto the inner side of the glass panels on the side. And while the paintings are gestural and abstract, it will incorporate figurative elements, drawing inspiration from the tenants' stories, their missions, their stories, and communities that they serve. So this wind shaft is already in there in the design by the architects to create fresh air into the staircase in case of fire, for fire safety. And I thought it would be a beautiful way to create this meandering painting, again, using flying white as a principle to connect the work to the atrium. So how does that work? For example, this is an existing painting previous I've done. I'm not saying this will be the painting, but just give an example. Once that is printed and transferred to the inside of glass, it may look like this. This just shows the translucency and also eligibility of the legibility of the painting. The third element will be oral history. I would like to create a website and mobile application to host the oral histories told by the people who call this building home in their own words, voices, and languages. And the recordings are linked to these time capsule embers embedded in the sculpture. Each orb is dedicated to a person or a group of people as a container for their memories and stories, thus creating a direct and tangible sense of ownership and belonging for the participants. Several of the embers are designated to be filled after the building has opened, so we can capture life in the new building and show that the ongoing nature of history. On the website, there will be an interactive map. So if you clicked on a particular orb, you can hear the story that this orb encapsulates. So here, I would love to have a call out to the community. If you have a story about 70 Mulberry Street you want to share, we invite everyone to participate, to contribute to these time capsules. We want to create a vibrant collection of voices that reflect the diversity of this community's history and experiences. And your participation will be really crucial in shaping this narrative. If you or someone you know have a story to tell, we will share details at a later date when that phase of the artwork begins. And I hope to collaborate with you in the future to preserve the essence of our community through these first-person accounts. So in full, at the end, I'm Jennifer Wen Ma. The project is called Wings of Everchange. That's composed of a sculpture, painting, and oral history. And like a creature in flux, this is meant to embody the continuous state of becoming that is our community, rooted in the ancient teaching of I Ching, that change is inherent in all aspects of life. This work urges us to embrace the history of the building and community and approach the future with openness and adaptability. I also have this in Chinese for any members of the community allowed to read it in that. And I'm also here to answer any questions you might have live now or at a later stage. Thank you so much for the time you've given me and my project.
Great, thank you for the presentation. It was very illuminating. We're going to take any public comments here in person. If anybody has any comments in person. Can you actually also just sign up and
Yeah, I'm
in a
on the
second?
sheet.
You're on the sheet, great.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you have 2 minutes. Can you please give us your comments? Thank you.
My name is Victor Huey. I'm a member, I grew up in Chinatown, I've been there for 73 years. Chinatown was formed. Why was it formed? Because of the racial discrimination and pressures we faced. It was a safe place that we made for ourselves. We couldn't work anywhere in the city. We couldn't enter any profession. We couldn't own land. We couldn't join unions. We were basically undocumented aliens from 1882 to 1943. Now, PS 23 became a beacon for our community. Working class people. My mother was a seamstress, my father worked in laundry, because those were the only businesses that they were allowed to work in. When I see this kind of trash can art in Walker Street, and you bring in people who have no connection to our community, none. Chinatown is not China. What we went through surviving in Chinatown has nothing to do with what happens overseas. We had to fight to build a safe place for ourselves. And every so many decades, we get this anti-Asian, whatever you want to call it, as is happening now. We have to honor the heroes of our community, which is the working class people. The people who, my father was in the US Navy. You know what his job was? Third-class laundryman. My grandfather was in World War I. You know what his job was? Cook. They joined the military even though they were not able to vote, own land, even bring their wives to this country until 1946. Where is our history in this building? I don't want to hear an audio factoid of somebody who has no connection with the community.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Are you finished? With about 2 minutes. Appreciate it. That was a very a good comment. Are there any board members here present that would like to make any comments?
No.
Newly appointed board chairs, just in the public, since we do have a board chair member here.
Thank you. I missed the beginning part, so I don't want to comment on the art piece without having the full context of it, but I thank you all for presenting on this very important process of.
Great, thank you. And next, we're going to take public comments on Zoom. And if you're actually a board, we're also going to then, after we're done with that, we'll take public comments from board members. If you're a board member, please remember to change your name and identify yourselves.
There's Carlin, so. Carlin has his hand.
Okay. So we take members of the public first, and you've got 2 minutes. Let's just
Hello,
You're up.
am I live? Okay. First, I'd like to echo some of Victor Huey's sentiments about representation from our local community, not from people from Queens, not from people from Brooklyn, but people who actually grew up here, like myself. Secondly, Jennifer, I remember on our last meeting, you had stated that you would reach out to the advisory panel members to hold the further meetings before you came up with a conceptual design, or a very what do you call it, preliminary conceptual design. But it seems like you've more or less finalized this design you're presenting tonight. Have you held any of these meetings? Because I was on the advisory panel, but I never received any notification about a follow-up meeting with you. Thank you.
Thank you, both comment. I just want to address that I moved to Chinatown actually 5 minutes away from the building site since in 1999. So I definitely have not been in the community as long as some of you, but it is a very important part of my American story as well. So I came to New York to be an artist, and Chinatown has nourished me. This building has been a beacon in my life as well. So it's a really honor and privilege to give back to our community and to this building. And I do agree that we need to represent more of the community rather than, it is not my ever my intention to helicopter in, just airdrop an artwork. So I did reach out to, I've held community public meetings. I've had interviews with tenants, multiple one-on-one interviews. It is not easy to interview everybody. While I say that this is a conceptual presentation, it is not finalized. I am continuously taking more thoughts and feedback from the community. And this is why we come to you with this presentation. It is not set in stone. Any of the forms you see are just playful process, and as an artist would do. That's why I purposefully showed very, sketch, pencil sketches to ink to more maquettes, like physical maquettes, is to show the process. And if I'm happy to provide my email address, it is hard to, I did have a call out to the community, but not always is there a response. But if there are specific participation you would like to have, I would love that. I would really invite that and love that. And I would be happy to share my studio's email address so we can have a more in-depth conversation.
Okay, I think Carlin specific, you can maybe unmute him.
Yes, actually, yes, that's exactly what I had. You held meetings with specific groups and everything, but I was on an advisory panel. My name appeared on one of those slides. I was not invited to this. So we have groups trying to hijack this piece of artwork, that a public artwork. You're not getting the full story here. You're only getting select people who have reached out to you. I don't know who you reached out to, but my email was not on you. I never received anything from you. All right, so yes, please get my email from the, or put your email in there, and I will reach out to you, and I will set up a group of community members to meet with you.
Absolutely. I have your name written down this time now, and I'll definitely reach out through my colleagues at the DDC to you and your group, and so we can have a more in-depth conversation. I will welcome that. Thank you for your interest in the project, and it would never be my intention to hijack anything. Again, I'm here to give back to the community. I do work overseas a lot. I do get a lot of invitation, and that's and I've always wanted to do more for my community here in New York and in Chinatown. So it's really an honor, and I would never want for that effort to be seen as anything but genuine. So I will welcome your participation.
Public comments on Zoom. Any of you raise your hands? No other comments? Great. So at this time, I'd like to take any comments from. No. All right, we've got one. Let's recognize Carrie.
Is this a public hearing?
No.
No.
It's a little different format, the way we're allowing questions.
How John decided.
Hi, was it my turn?
Yeah, you've got 2 minutes, thank you.
Thanks. I just wanted to thank Jennifer for the presentation. My biggest question is maybe even a question for the architects rather than Jennifer. One of the most notable features of this building is the remnant stair tower. And I know you guys have gone through many iterations of design, but I would love to see more of the history of the building, as well as the history of the neighborhood, the history of the building itself reflected in the building, which means that one of the most significant features was that magnificent wrought iron railing in the stair hall, which seems to have been completely erased. I see Jennifer references it in her sculpture, but it's not in the stair hall anymore. I'm wondering if that was something that was unsalvageable, if the architects could speak to that, and two, if it is still there, why can't it stay there?
Hi, Carrie, this is Yo-Yo Chen of Grimshaw. Thank you for your questions. Because the stair, we want to preserve the stair. We are aiming to keep the stone tray of the stair to reuse that. But because the new building level difference, we have to rebuild the staircase because the elevation, the level 1 and 2, we lower the whole ground floor to be aligned with the street facade. It used to be 4 feet above it, but now we bring it down and then so have better connection with the street. And then its result. And due to the new program, the floor level is different. So we have to rebuild the stair to reach to the different levels. So that's the reason we can't reuse that. But the stone tray, we are aiming to reuse that to, I would say, salvage and then reuse in the new stair tower.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
So I was just trying to manage time, by the way I was setting it up.
Yeah, just didn't know.
No worries. So I'd like to ask if the board members have any comments on the project or questions.
I have one, this is for the artist, Jennifer.
I filled it up. Well, I'm finished.
Sorry about that, Jennifer, we're just here. Your work or your medium seems familiar and your name seems familiar. Did you work on Pier 42 in New York City, Lower Manhattan a few years back?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
And your experience from that, because I remember working, this was many years ago, with you and the project, and your experience there and reaching out to the community for your project, which was initially a bit stark, to be honest, but after we saw the project, it was more accepted because people had never really seen something like that. So if you can just give a quick synopsis of that particular project.
Yeah, so good memory. I made a ink garden. I work with Chinese ink a lot as a material. So I created ink garden. I painted Chinese ink on these plants in these planters along Pier 42. And that was very stark indeed, but the plants actually continue to grow and change. They flower, they become green. So in time it changed and injected life back into the site. And that piece was was about the neglect that I felt because I lived only like 5 minutes away from the site. So I could walk to work every day. And that was such a pleasure because again, I travel a lot for work and just to be able to work on my doorstep, that was just a really profound experience for me that really made me want to reach out to more projects within New York and do more things here so that I can give back. And then I realized that the connection was more profound for me. And that project was difficult, challenging, because I did want to use plants and it was all approved and we actually had water access, but it was very difficult because it was a long neglected site. So I had a lot of challenges, which I don't want to go too much into here, but it really showed me how neglect is not trauma that does damage to, like, they say these plants, is a ongoing neglect. And that kind of trauma that's ongoing, that wreaks more havoc to a work, a person, a community. And that a work and healing requires repeated encounters. So I actually did make a very concerted effort to reach out to the community to have in-depth conversations. And it is not enough. I'm hearing it from you guys, and I will love to reach out more and have more in-depth conversation. But that is something that I took a lot from that experience. To heal a community requires repeated presence, repeated work, ongoing work. And I think that's what public art should be. And I hope this work will create a feeling of, I want to create a feeling of coming together of community and not one of neglect or, hijacking. That's like the opposite of what I would want for this work.
Okay, thank you.
Any other board members? No? Okay, so we've been requested to offer a letter of support that they can take back. What's the name of who are you taking to again? You're taking to the next month?
Commission.
Which commission? Sorry. Design Commission. Ask for a resolution in support of this project to go to the Design Commission. We've got a draft resolution that was written up. If we could just put that up on the screen.
Pardon me, John.
Yeah.
So, this is the final that you're presenting. Colin asked that you go back and you speak to others in the community, but you're not going to do that? I mean, are you going to reach out to others in the community before before you finalize this design?
This is not finalized.
This is not finalized.
This
This
is
is just
only
a-
conceptual, it is not.
Oh, okay.
design.
I'm sorry. Okay.
So
we
it
just-
is not, yeah, it is not the final design. It's conceptual, saying that I will want to work with the community members on finding what words of aspiration and wishes for the building, saying that I want to record stories of people who have lived in Chinatown, who have used the building, who have used the neighborhood, their stories connected to this. These are the elements I want to work with. Exactly what form they will take, no, it is not finalized. So I haven't even done that design yet. This is just the concept of the direction I want to go. A work hanging in the lobby, something that could go into the stair tower like a painting, and as well as a oral history archive that people can access like via an app or website. So these are the things, the parameters I'm sketching out. I also would like to use MoCA's archives. There's just not enough time to go into all the details I have thought about for this work. I would love to work with MoCA's oral history archive to capture some of that history that we no longer have access to our present memory. So, there's, so this is just sketching out the direction. This is not the final form. So there's still a lot of room for input.
So this resolution is a draft. I mean, it's for the conceptual work of the artist, the program. I'm trying to use my glasses to zoom in.
Right, I can't see.
So-
I can read it out loud, actually.
Oh, I can read it now.
Yeah.
I don't have.
That would make it easier for me to read it out loud. We have to do that.
Yeah, you should.
Sure, yeah, it's, whereas in 1982, local law 65, the percent for art law was passed, which states that 1% of the capital funds appropriated for newly constructed or reconstructed city-owned buildings or sites must be allocated for the works of art. And whereas the percent for art panel of local stakeholders chosen for community context and insight awarded the project to Jennifer Wen Ma, a local artist who has lived in Chinatown since 1999. And whereas Jennifer Wen Ma presented a conceptual presentation of her proposed installation titled Wings of Everchange for 70 Mulberry that drew inspiration from in-person and virtual community engagements, individual tenant interviews, Museum of Chinese and American Archives, the artist's longstanding relationship with the neighborhood and its recent community events, I Ching, the Analects, Dao Beijing, don't quote me on that pronunciation, Book of Mountains and Seas, as well as other ancient Chinese texts. And whereas the art installation will have three parts, a suspended sculpture in the atrium, a long continuous painting winding up the stair tower, a virtual archive of oral histories from the people who have used and know the building well. And whereas Jennifer Wen Ma will incorporate the following three elements that merge together and form the artwork. Salvaged architectural elements from the Berg building, memories of its occupants encased in time capsules, community members' aspirations and wishes for the future. So therefore, CB3 supports Jennifer Wen Ma's installation, Wings of Everchange as the art installation site 70 Mulberry. So since it's still conceptual, I mean, we can obviously change the last line if, unless we plan to have them back, or we.
I would.
Do they need us to come back or no?
I don't think they need to come back, but I would, because this is going for design commission. Is there a date on that?
The design commission next month, right?
Yes.
So there is no going back. I would just address the individual's concerns and Carlin's concerns with a whereas that says that you need more community outreach. We support it, but it needs more community outreach. I don't have the language for that,
Right.
that needs to go somewhere.
And it needs to reflect, more.
Because it's conceptual right now.
That's right.
But the only thing that we can say to that is that perhaps more outreach is needed to finalize for the final design. I should probably have better language for that.
Want me to suggest?
Yeah.
Therefore, be it further resolved, CB3 asks the artist to continue further outreach with community members before finalizing the design.
Yeah.
And what is the approximate timeline for the design to be finished? Any idea or?
We actually have quite a lot of time because the building is not slated to be finished till the end of 2027. And the artwork, just generally DDC's schedule is that I will go in to install the quarter before. So we're looking at maybe summer 2027. So there's quite a lot of lead-in time for, and this is, if this is approved, so this is conceptual design, I will come back with the preliminary design, which will be where the artwork actually takes place. This is where I would do all the interviews with, from tenants to community members to create the time capsule, all of that will be done we have a lot of time. We have several years to do that. And, if CB3 wants to give me a timeline of coming back at a certain time to do updates, I'm more than happy to do that to make sure that we're on track to do this right by the community.
Do we have another therefore that says that she should do exactly that?
Well, all of that, which I don't remember, or that,
Just
that
come-
she would additionally
And we'll
come back
return with a preliminary
Community
design.
Award 3 with the preliminary.
Right.
For the preliminary, yeah. That's the next phase. So that's the actual design. Yeah.
Return to CB3.
That's good.
Yeah.
All right.
So I'm gonna ask one thing, and I don't know if you get this, typically when a lot of projects go to design commission, we don't necessarily hear the comments of the design commission.
We don't necessarily.
Do we hear the comments from the design commission? Because my experience is that we don't get their comments.
They don't send us the comments, I'm sure, they're probably online or anything.
Could we ask for the agency to send us those comments, or is that?
Sure. We further ask that DC, this is the cultural affairs.
Yeah, to send us the.
Forward comments from the design commission.
Yeah, I think we should add that because we need to know what they're thinking too.
Agreed. Sounds good to me. So add it as another.
Yeah, another further CB3 request. Department of Cultural Affairs.
Request Department of Culture Affairs, what? Sorry. So forward comments from.
Comments from the design commission to the community board.
Community board 3. Any other comments or suggestions from members, questions? No? Does anybody have a motion they'd like to make?
Motion to support.
We have a second?
Second.
All right. Take a vote here. I don't think there are any conflicts.
Yeah, just take a roll call.
Just take a roll call.
Damaris, John,
Yes.
Ariadna, yes, Alistair,
Yes.
Herman, Trevor,
Yes.
Laura, Jaylene, Sandra.
Yes.
Steve, Megan, Nisha.
Good,
So
cool.
it's unanimous.
We have Paul.
I'm sorry?
How many is?
Because the chair could vote if we go.
Six.
Yeah, 6. Is it 7?
How many count, how many there are?
We lost one, although she magically showed up.
Pardon?
There's
We
12.
lost one member, but she magically showed up, so.
Well,
12 if we don't count Andrea.
what?
12 if we don't count Andrea.
So you should take Andrea off.
Yeah.
So 11 then, so we have
No,
6.
So we have quorum.
We have
11 members or 12 members?
There's 12 members.
So we have 50%. We don't have a majority. So just put quorum not present.
We have to ratify.
And it'll be moved at the full.
Okay, very good. George is here. All right, so that will end that particular event. We want to thank, again, everyone who was here to present and the artists. All of your comments, and we look forward to hearing continued updates about this building and hopefully hear good things. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to move on to our last topic, which is sort of a discussion again on the City of Yes zoning for economic opportunity. We don't have a specific presentation tonight. We do have some people here who we will who are present. One actually is Francesca Bruce, who's here from DCP. And she will be noting things that are said here and take that back to DCP in terms of comments. Is she here, Francesca? Great. Thanks for being here, Francesca. We also have Connor here from Councilmember Marte, who's actually provided a really nice summary of a lot of the changes and sort of the impact they might actually have on our community. And then finally, we also had George Jane, who wrote a really fantastic memo for us that went into very specific detail about whether or not the impact of each of these different specific things would affect us. So what I was thinking is that since
And Julio.
and Julio, sorry,
Right here.
I didn't know Julio was there. And sorry, what's his name? Julio what?
Julio
From Councilmember. Okay, great, thank you, excellent. Sure, yeah, great. So what I was thinking is that given that there's been so much interest from the public on this, I think it would be, I wouldn't mind taking 2-minute public comments from people just on this topic in general, so that we could again get more stuff to go back to DCP. And I think we've also been joined by some board members who've identified themselves who may also want to give public comment as well, even though they're not present. And then we'll start a discussion on stuff and try to get some work done. So are there any anybody from the public at present who want to speak about City of Yes? No? Anybody online who'd like to make a comment who's a member of the public? First, and we'll go to board members.
Clint's on there.
Yeah.
Clint's on there.
We have Laura.
I don't know if the others.
Laura? Great. So let's have Laura, if you've got 2 minutes.
She's not a member.
No, I'm gonna have her go first and then we'll have members go.
Hi, thank you. So my organization, East Village Community Coalition, has been following and working with CB3 on small business issues since at least 2010. We've been tracking small businesses since 2006, and we've noticed as there's a small local independent businesses. We have a lot. We are well aware of the proliferation on the residential side streets, a lot of which is really some of our best retail, if you will, is grandfathered non-conforming. a street like 9th Street, where you have such a wonderful arrangement and of groups who work together and a wide variety of services. What?
We lost you.
Just promoted.
Sorry, folks. Did you hear anything of what I said before? I was since
Yes.
Okay. I just rejoined as a panelist. Thank you. So we love those areas, and we don't want them to go away at all. But at the same time, the idea of having them expand in any way is we predict to be a problem. We've noticed over the years a lot less neighborhood serving dry goods retail and a lot more destination nightlife. So the rents on the side streets are a lot less expensive and therefore more attractive to a small store. If these spots become attractive to restaurants and bars, they're already out competing the dry goods retail. It's going to just drive it out of our neighborhood. So it's very important to us that we keep that protection that we have where they really can't expand. And that we look at the use groups. So the use groups seem to be moving in a direction that's opposite of what we would really wish for our neighborhood, because what we would like to see is low impact businesses on the residential side streets, not additional foot traffic, not noise late at night, not garbage pickups. So that's my primary concern about this proposal. There are many, and I did speak at the last meeting. I think I expressed some of them, but we really fear that this sort of location, which is where you'll find most of our local merchant association members, most of our local independent dry goods retail shops, we just really think that it should be protected, not have all uses let loose on them. We'd love to see restaurants and bars taken out of use group 6 and just be made a completely separate thing. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Great, thank you. Were there any other public comments? If not, I think, did Clint have his hand raised?
Yes, I promoted.
Clint?
Okay, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I'm actually out. I'm not going to turn on my camera, but I just wanted to speak as most of you know, but I'll introduce myself. I'm chair of the Community Board 3 SLA committee. One problem that I see and that I've seen for years since I've been on the community board is this grandfathering clause, as Laura touched on. It really does protect us on our residential side streets. We have huge conflicts with the businesses that exist currently, even if they're grandfathered. And by wiping away that protection and putting everything into the same category, whether it's bars, retail, restaurants, and then to allow that to expand in any way is even more, it would just cause more conflicts. And as we know, we do support our bars and restaurants and our small businesses and our residents. And that's why having those on a residential side street where most of the buildings are usually, they're usually older buildings, tenement buildings, and they're just not quite up to the standards of being able to support a bar and restaurant, which has noise and crowds, and it becomes a nuisance. So the grandfather clause is something that really has been effective in at least helping us mitigate some of those problems. And the ability that if something is vacant for 2 years, that reverts back to residential. That we don't use that clause very often, but having that ability to take back some of our residential spaces, or at least our residential protections on a side street, is very useful. So, I mean, I have many concerns about these changes, but specifically for tonight, I would like to at least speak to the grandfathering issue and how important that is to retain those protections.
Great,
Thank you.
Were there any other board members that had their hands raised?
I don't know if this is Larry.
I don't think so.
Yeah, Yeah, that's just a public member that we used to during the last.
I don't know who Larry Reed is, but it doesn't sound like.
No, he's not a board member. So, I mean, I can allow them to speak.
Yeah.
I prefer to get more comments. Recognize Larry who's his hand up.
Okay,
Oh, I'm
so
sorry.
promote him to panelist.
Instead of Lawrence.
Larry, you've got 2 minutes.
Should be able to talk.
Larry, you've got 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Just get to unmute.
Unmute yourself. Larry, are you there? All right, so we lost him.
Ask him to put something in chat.
Yeah, Larry, chat, type something in the chat if you're still there having technical issues.
It only goes to panelists.
Well, he's a panelist.
Well, it seems to have gone back to what intended.
Yeah, I can type
Maybe
to
you
everyone.
promote it again.
Yep.
Yeah, I do have a question slash comment. I don't know, I may have missed this in the last meeting. It may have been brought up, so sorry for the redundancy, but I think it's important. I guess my question would be for Francesca or George. What I understand sort of at the 11th hour, the administration proposed casinos as one of the use groups, I think. Obviously, I have a number of personal concerns that I'm sure the community would as well with adding that in any kind of use group and like in an as of right manner. So if anybody has any more information, I think that would be something of significant concern.
The casino that's coming up as part of the text amendment it's for casinos that have already been approved, nothing in CB3.
Okay,
Oh.
so then, okay, so.
Because I immediately got a circle call Francesca.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
And also the state has to approve it as well, right? Is there something already approved?
Yeah,
or-
those are ones that were approved.
Approved by
Doesn't
state.
mean it's never gonna happen.
Okay, so would not affect us.
But nothing here.
So,
They unmuted.
the other comment I wanted to make, is, I guess I would like to explore this a little bit more, but in use group 8, art, music, dancing, theater studios is included as a newly allowed category. Obviously, I come from the arts background world, so I'm very supportive of that and personally know how difficult it is for arts groups to acquire real estate and operate venues and galleries and all sorts of things. So I feel like this is something to applaud. I'm just curious a little bit more about how they're grouped all together. Yeah, I don't know if PCP or George has any kind of insight there, but this is a very significant part of our neighborhood as well. We have one of the.
So George could speak to it, but Francesca's just here to listen and not answer any
Sure.
questions. George, you want to comment quickly?
Yeah, sure. So that's all of those uses are now placed into the new use group 8, which is a commercial use group, and they're going to be allowed in all commercial districts. It's part of the, in the old zoning, you had lots of minor variations between those different groups or different actual specific uses. And this one is more of a broad brush, and it's much more generous in terms of how it allows these things. And I can't speak to why they were selected, but there is a certain logic between how they've grouped the uses together. And considering there are only 10, those seem to be like a reasonable grouping of uses. Does that answer your question, or you have something more specific about it?
No, I thank you. Yeah, I just welcome to any sort of background.
Yeah.
Great. Yes.
Question on your speaker.
Yeah, I was also I just wanted
You want to go?
just want to quickly talk about how I want to start the discussion. Hopefully that will be, I think, conducive. First, I wanted to, George given us this great memo. what I wanted to just quickly maybe go through the things that really probably don't affect us and just, there might be tangential effect, but, just if we don't have a real opinion or comment for change to, not have a large ongoing discussion about it. There are, I think, a few of those. And then what I'd like to do is then maybe just talk about some general comments we'd want to make that we're concerned with the process. And then I think, given that they have these 18 points, we can then start writing or putting together language to hopefully, that would hopefully then go later to a resolution that we can pass next month, sorry. Hopefully. So if that sounds good to everybody, that way we can get out of the simple stuff first, and then, does that make sense? Sound good? Okay. Susan?
Okay. So I just want to say, we're going to be voting to either approve with comments, and we can put comments on each. There's 18 sections, but 3, I think we totally ruled out as not impacting us. So we can vote to oppose with comments or approve with comments. I want to say what I think, and this is, after speaking to Francesca and others, what's really, really important is to make the comments, because that's how you make change. Any changes that will be taken in, before this is finalized, and also very much for our council members who are going to be voting and negotiating at city council. So I just wanted to urge people to be very specific on, like, if there's, uses like home occupation that you think would be terrible for some reason, specify those, that you would think some would be very good, but others might, be unsafe or something like that. So I just want to urge people to be specific in their comments. And then if I could speak again to the grandfathering.
Sure. Well, you want to speak when it comes up specifically as a topic?
Whichever you prefer.
Yeah, maybe. Well, let's try to group everything all together. So just having looked at the list and sort of thinking about the comments that George made and the other comments we sort of had, I think number 2 doesn't really rate to affect us anyone, and topic 2 is less the difference between commercial districts. And I think basically, so the main comment that George had, while this is a major change to the text on the resolution, it's a relatively minor change to our neighborhoods. And I would tend to agree with that. I don't know if anybody's thought about this one or thinks it would not impact us, or maybe even if.
What specifically is the change?
So these are the changes where, like, for example, when there's like a C1 and a C2 on different sides of the street, they would basically all those things would be sort of the same. Basically, there's the 6 different commercial districts, and they would generally be designed that, they could do sort of the same things now. It would be I think there's not that much distinction between C1 and C2. Is that correct, George?
Yeah, that's right. And so very often, when you're walking down the street, you don't notice the difference between a C1 and C2 because, most everything that's in a C2 can also be in a C1. And so, there are a few services that can only operate in a C2, like movie theaters or, bike repair and things like that. But they're the kind of things that service the local neighborhood. And so getting rid of the distinction between them, it's something that DCP wants to do. And they've been, they haven't even been mapping C1 districts for the last 20 years. They've only been mapping C2. And it's something that they've been working towards for a while. And I think from just a regular resident's perspective, it's not the kind of thing I would notice the difference. And I'm a zoning person.
Yes, Susan.
So I'll tell you where we notice the difference. Difference between C1 and C2, we're all about nightlife. And C2 can have scheduled performances, so that C1 can't, and the cover charge in the theaters. So if you have a band with, a pretty large size audience coming out at 4 a.m. on a C2, but you don't have that in C1, and this would be, say, on Avenue A, which is C2, but you couldn't do it on Avenue B, which is C1.
Can I comment on that? Because they are changing those rules, right? So the entertainment or the nightclub rules are
Under 9.
changing. Yes, exactly. So that those, regardless of any change that's happening in the C1 and C2, they want to allow for the nightclubs in C1s, right? That's essentially nightclubs can go anywhere, and under 9. And they would be only limited by size. So in C1 and C2, they would have to be for less than 200 people. And if it's more than 200 people, it has to be in a C4 through C6.
So the distinction we have now would no longer hold true, but I would say that those changes are very much going to affect some parts of our neighborhood. Right now, we try to keep those kind of 200-person entertainment on Delancey Street, Houston, certain wide avenues, as opposed to the commercial overlays in the more residential areas. So that may be something the board wants to comment on, because it's something the community quite often comes to us with issues.
I mean, basically, that distinction for nightlife doesn't exist anymore, right, George, because of 9, is that correct or no?
Well, right, if 9 passes, it wouldn't exist anymore. That's right.
So it wouldn't, so this one doesn't matter, because if 9 passes, we're
I
hosed.
think what you're pointing out is that there's no point in commenting on C1 and
Right.
C2, but maybe comment on the other change with the.
I mean, what we could do is say is that we feel like we agree that certain things need to be modernized. However, we disagree. We will make a further comment about nightlife establishments.
In the other section.
Right. Does that make sense? Is it? Anybody happy with that?
And so if we do that, would it be specifying that under a specific district type, it wouldn't allow for nightlife? Is that what we're saying?
No, we would be opposing certain types of nightlife,
Okay.
new uses for nightlife, basically.
For all
districts?
It would not impact like a neighborhood bar, it would not impact a restaurant. It would impact a place with like scheduled performances and 200 people or 199 people.
Yeah, and there are other, I think under 9, there are other reasons that we want to get into it, particularly with the fact that for some reason DCP doesn't realize that, it's for seeing 100 and 300 people coming out at 4 o'clock in the morning is probably not that relevant to us. Like 100 is a lot and is very noisy. So anyway, that's something I think we're going to discuss in 9. So anyone disagree with that? Members of the committee, just that sounds like a reasonable sort of thing to discuss. Okay, great. So let's sort of move on to my next one that looks like we don't care about. Number 7, which is just going to update agricultural uses.
Can I comment on that for a second?
Sure, yeah.
Just because I've actually updated my thinking on that, and I want to explain that. When something like this comes out, it's like a 1,000-piece puzzle that's thrown on a table, and you can look at a piece and say, well, I understand that piece, but when you start putting it together with other pieces, a different picture appears. And this is something that came to me today on this particular item, is that what they're doing with agriculture is that they're saying that agriculture can be located indoors in every district. Right now, it can be located outdoors in every district. So if it's indoors, it follows the community facility bulk regulations, which is the bulkier. So like in an R72, it could be twice as big as a residential building. Now, cannabis is an agricultural product. And cannabis could be, you could have cannabis grow rooms, cannabis buildings, cannabis vertical farmings in your residential districts. I don't know if people are going to do that, but that's something that zoning would allow. This zoning would allow it. The change in agriculture uses would allow for, you know, a 6 or 8 or 12-story cannabis grow room in your residential district, and the zoning would permit sales of the products grown on site.
So, but that's also regulated by the state as well.
It is.
though.
It absolutely is. Right.
Not like you can just randomly open up there. So that was the one question I actually had myself. Like in general, I'm not really concerned about like leafy greens and stuff like that. But cannabis is.
Yeah, I had raised it last time because I'm aware of several people who do it already. You can smell it on every floor because it has a certain scent.
While it's growing.
Yeah, you can definitely.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's because they're allowed, I think, 3 plants or something. They're allowed to grow 3 or 4 plants. 4, but.
My friends.
Oh, yeah.
No, I have family and friends in Long Island, so I know people who plant it, but it's 4 per household.
And no one sticks to that. To be honest, they grow a lot, but it smells up the entire building, and there's not much you can do because they're allowed 4. But I can tell you right now, if you're in a building that has it, you will know.
Yeah, personally, I would. Again, like I said, my opinion is I don't care about the other uses like onions and leafy greens, although onions could get that or garlic. But I mean, I don't think that's what they're going to be growing. I mean, I think it'd be more likely things are more expensive, like baby greens and things that actually raise money. So I'm not concerned about those things. I am concerned about cannabis, and for a lot of reasons. I also lived in California, where cannabis is legalized for growth, but it's usually obviously in outdoor farms. A lot of these farms are like armored facilities in a sense because of crime. And so if you actually had cannabis being grown inside a residential building, who's to say it's not going to increase the likelihood of crime? Like, you know, somebody needs to get their, you know, their weed and they don't want to pay for it. And, you know, next thing you know, there's something growing in your building and like, you know, so I'm actually concerned about that.
So outside of 4 per household, what are the rules for like commercialized growth of cannabis? Like the state needs to give you a license or?
I mean, they're all brand new and I've only been focusing on the applications every year.
Does Connor or George know offhand generally what it is or no?
I don't know the state rules. I just know what the zoning says. That the zoning doesn't have any limit on the amount you can grow in a agricultural facility.
So George, if we were to comment on that, but without being too specific, what do you suggest our comment would be?
Well, I mean, my position is, I mean, what my concern is the competition with housing. So you could, so like how commercial uses can compete with housing, we're allowing for agricultural uses, cannabis or not, to be classified as a community facility and placed in residential districts that could displace or essentially replace or compete with housing. And for, you know, I think that's, you know, if you were to say you want a agricultural use in your residential district or you want housing, I think you would want housing, or at least most would. And so that's one of the reasons that I you know, that I think it's an important issue, just simply because, you know, there's only so much land. And there's only so much land that you can put people in. And do you want to actually put crops there instead?
So that's a question for DEC. Okay. Does anybody have any more comments about, I mean, any more thoughts particularly on agriculture?
I'm just curious about it. Doesn't the state have to approve if you're going to have commercial usage for like weed?
They would do it, but it has to. But they can only approve it in areas that the city allows it, just like liquor.
So if the city allows the growth of cannabis, like, you know,
They would have to get a
commercial,
state
they would also
license.
have to get a state license.
Right. So I think maybe our comment should be that we're fine with we're fine with this with the exception of the growth of cannabis. And this would be my idea, but I'm happy to entertain others, anyone's opinion, would be that A, for environmental reasons, the fact that cannabis has a very strong smell and it's not one that like goes away even after the product. I mean, it's gonna wind up staying in the walls, right? It's a smell that just doesn't go away. So that's an environmental problem that is gonna bother people. And also, I think there's not an enforcement issue, but there's an issue of, given the way other states that have cannabis growing places, there's a possibility of greater crime, particularly in a residential building. And I think that's something that is not being addressed, and maybe that should be held back until there's some better idea of exactly how this would be handled, because I think a large scale, cannabis farm would be a disaster in a residential building or a mixed use building. Susan?
I would say also besides, well, first of all, I think on the crime, it'd probably be good if we could get some documentation from California, to quote that. But aside from those two issues, cannabis, you can make more money with cannabis than many other things. I'm seeing bars now, which are, have a very small margin of profitability. Some of the bar owners are wanting to turn over to cannabis, which is understandable. So it's the same, what George was saying, is the conflict with housing. If somebody's gonna rent residential space, they probably can get a lot more money from someone growing cannabis because they make more money, they can afford to pay higher rent, as opposed to a big conflict with affordable housing.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's one of the main concepts I wanted to I think will be one of our general concepts, is actually the way that, and we'll get into that later, but it's in general, one of the things that seems to be not considered in this is that they're doing a rezoning of business without housing when there's a clear conflict, and that seems problematic. But anyway, we'll get to that, but I agree. Did you have a comment? No. Any other comments on 7? Okay, it wasn't as easy as I thought, but I wasn't sure about cannabis, but I was gonna bring up the question of cannabis. Go back. The ones that are not. So, some other ones that are not. Let's see, so actually 13 is one that is interesting, and I wanted to, I don't think it's gonna take long, but I wanted to get, I don't know if people saw George's opinion on this, but it's basically the,
Permit auto repair?
yeah, permit auto repair. So the problem with this is that, let me just get sort of the nut graph of what George actually said about this. So sort of the problem with this is that previously, actually, George, you want to explain about building bulletins and exactly how it's going to wind up actually promoting car culture when we're trying to do exactly the opposite?
Well, okay, sure. As you all know, I think our zoning has been, especially in Manhattan, been actively hostile to cars and car ownership for the past 20 years. We've been rezoning all the places you could put car repair. We put parking maximums, done away with parking minimums. And this is like a real change from that, because there's a path forward now for auto, light vehicle repair with a special permit that could go into any commercial district. And then there's the, if you already have one and it's in a non-conforming area, so like if you're in a C, a C1 or C2 district, or if you're in a residential district, this will allow you to expand the use up to 50%, which is I was just very surprised to see that because I hadn't seen anybody say that during any of the presentations. The idea that you can expand a non-conforming automobile-related use in, essentially a grandfathered automobile use in a district. So
as of right,
yeah, yes, you can just do it as of right. There's not even a permit for it. That's right. So anyways, up to the bulk, up to the maximum of the bulk, right? You can't exceed the underlying zoning FAR, for instance. But it's just, it was notable. It was a notable thing that was, buried in the text that didn't hear anyone say. And, frankly, it's not going to affect very many places because there aren't that many of these things, and there aren't that many of them that would want to expand. But still, it's we see some of these on the thoroughfares. We see some of these in residential districts. I know, at least in my neighborhood, we do. And it's essentially a path forward to get new ones as well. So you are right that it is not a detriment to car culture. It is actually the reverse.
Right. So do we actually have, do we know, Susan, do you know offhand, or does anybody know offhand, do we actually have any of these in our
car repair?
We do have car repair.
One thing I'll add, and this is related but not related, that during Sandy, we got generators, but we couldn't get gasoline. There's like one gas station around there. It's great, but people underestimated the need for gas stations. And I'm just making a comment because we had a whole bunch of generators, but no way to get gas.
So going back to car repair, we do have one, I think it's on Attorney Street. That complaints like you won't believe, because they need a lot of places to park their cars, and so they're all over the sidewalks, they're taking up all the parking spaces, there's just no way to fit them in, and they get tickets all the time, but they make more money by having the cars there. So residents there have complained. They actually had the nerve to ask us to change the parking regulations so that they can use all the parking spaces on the street legally, which we did not put on the committee. But yeah, so that's the only one I'm aware of because we get complaints about it.
There was also the tire fix places.
The which one?
Tire fix places.
Oh, I don't know.
On Allen, right? Allen, also Delancey, which they put nails, no, put nails, but there's one off Delancey, there's a couple more in Chinatown.
Is
that considered car repair, or is that considered?
I don't know what that is. George, do you know what that's considered?
If tires, I don't know, and I don't think it's car repair though. I mean, I think it's actually easier to place. Tire sales, I know, are, and I'm not sure about repair. Sorry.
In any case, do you think this is more, it's more for the entire city as opposed, because they weren't really thinking about Manhattan when they wrote this particular portion?
Well, I think they might have been thinking about certain parts of Manhattan. I think, I know that like in East Harlem, for instance, they just got rid of most of their districts that could, legally get new car repair, because that's where most of the new housing comes from, is from C8 and M districts. They get rezoned for housing, and then there's no more place to put your automobile stations. And so I do think it's for some of Manhattan, but maybe more upper Manhattan outside the core.
Right. So I again, this is one of the general things I kind of want to comment for us, is that we, the concern is that, you need some other kind of tool aside from the hammer. Just using the hammer across the city doesn't make sense when there are neighborhoods that are very different. And, I think the hammer's wrong, and if you want to, consider different districts to be different, maybe you should just, some of those things. So that would be one of the things I would oppose, would be my opposition. So I'm getting the sense that we're mostly opposed to this, or we would, I mean, I know for sure, I'm definitely very concerned about the non-conforming use as of right would be a 50% expansion to me would be horrible in this neighborhood, I think. I don't.
I wonder if we want to oppose it, whether it'd be good to give an example of where it does exist and the specific problems it causes.
Because there are at least 3 in Manhattan.
Well, I was thinking in CB3.
And there are 3.
Okay. So, I think we should be very specific, as far as problems.
Okay, so the ones we do have is a problem, right?
We don't know about the other 2. There's one on Bridgeview, which is like next to Manhattan Bridge. And I don't know if they have a problem.
And it might,
I'd be surprised on
it
that one, 'cause
may
it's kind of a
be very
weird-
much a question of where it's located.
Right.
Right now, it's on a side street, it's a big problem. And it sounds like this would allow that to expand. So maybe it's a question of where the zoning.
Right, so. Yeah, so I mean, that sounds reasonable to me, where it really depends on where you want to have it. Even in our neighborhood, I agree, like, if you think about the area I live not far from Manhattan, where the Manhattan Bridge is, that's kind of a weird area there where it's, as long as it's not in the face of like the NYCHA residents and affecting their parking or something, but, because NYCHA residents need to park too, but,
We can go down and take a look at them.
yeah, but I think in general, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I was gonna say, could it potentially solve for some of the problems we noted though, if they're like parking on the street using sidewalk space because they're not able to expand, giving them more space? There's not that many in the district.
Giving them, the one on Attorney, there's no place to give them space.
The one, I don't know about the one on Attorney, but there's the one on the corner of Delancey Street and Columbus. I know it's like a lower building, but I don't know if that's something that could be expanded in the future.
Delancey and
Columbia? Oh, yeah, sorry, Columbia.
So George, this also gives incentives to expand to new businesses as well, basically, or?
Just expanding the shop in general.
It's only expanding the shops that are there now, or it would?
Yes, no, it would be only expansion of the shops that are there now, currently grandfathered uses, they can expand. And then if you wanted a new one, you would have to go get a special permit, but you could get a special permit in a C1 or a C2 district, basically anywhere. And it's a BSA special permit, which means to you, it means that it's not a ULURP action. So
Right.
CPC special permits are ULURP actions. BSA special permits are not.
Okay.
So we're getting rid of grandfathering for some things and creating grandfathering for other things. Right?
Well, no, their proposal on grandfathering is essentially to make grandfathering permanent.
Right, so there won't be, it'll be legal, it'll be forever, so it won't be the grandfathered discontinuance, but then we're creating another grandfathered use.
So I think, I think this gets to another point, I think that's a general point, is that, again, it's not only, you just don't have a single tool to hammer. The problem is that in each neighborhood, the neighborhood knows better what's happening than the BSA or, city planning. And so I think we should recommend that I think we should, personally, I don't know if I'm excited about a 50% expansion. I think that would be crazy. I wouldn't be opposed to that personally, but I think it should be a ULURP action, minimally, to give us some voice. And
BSA comes to us.
do they come to us for those two?
Yeah,
No,
BSA.
listen to us.
Whether they listen to us depends who's the chair of the BSA, but they do come to us. But I'm wondering if, we're talking about one street where there shouldn't be expansion, other locations, maybe we should have expansion only in certain areas meeting certain criteria.
Okay, do we want to maybe come up with criteria then, or what?
Well, I guess space,
Right,
the
so
space-
criteria would have
the
to be
space that would
space.
not be taken away from other current uses.
Okay. And certainly not take away from housing or parking, right? Present,
Neighborhood parking, sidewalk obstruction.
okay, so take up more space, parking, sidewalk. Okay. Has anybody feel strongly about it making it be, even though it's technically, want to make it a ULURP, or does it matter to anybody, or?
I'm gonna suggest, I don't think the city is going to say, you're gonna go through this, 9-month process, you know, you're making it a very bureaucratic burden. They could go through it anyway.
Okay. Well, that actually brings up another point. So anyway, so if the ULURP is not what we care about, we would oppose it, and we give it these specific, we would oppose it unless it meets these specific criteria, right? Does that make sense?
I mean, it's kind of what you were saying.
Right?
Connor has his hand.
Connor? Unmute Connor there.
You can speak on mute.
Is he promoted?
He's kind of speaking up.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Hi, okay, thanks for having me. This is Connor from Councilmember Marte's office. Just on the ULURP first piece, just to clarify, I think, and George, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but the difference between like a BSA special permit and a CPC special permit is not necessarily like full ULURP. Just a CPC special permit would give council the opportunity to vote on an item. It wouldn't necessarily go through like the full ULURP you see for a rezoning, but it would just give council more input than a BSA special permit would.
And would it come to the community board also?
Yes, yeah, because you mentioned that community board does get notice about BSA special permits already. I think the biggest difference between the two is whether or not council has a say.
Right, that's exactly right. And very often council doesn't call up special permits, meaning like it's kind of a perfunctory rubber stamp at the council level, but they have the option to. Right. And so if you like go, this is terrible, and they pass it over you, you can go to your council member, and your council member can say, I'm calling that up. Right. And so it's a way of enforcing local control, in my opinion. And the process, the application process isn't so different, right? You still got to fill out the forms, you still got to go to the meetings, it still comes to the community board. It's just whether, you have the ability to, call on your council member to do y'all a favor there.
So to me, this actually ties into the next other ones that are not particularly relevant to us. Basically, they're trying to get rid of, I can understand getting rid of ULURP because of the long process, but they're also trying to cut out city council being able to object, and other ones that later come. I'm sorry, Susan?
I said that would be terrible.
Yeah, it would be terrible. So I think we should oppose it. And it would have to be, I think we should say that it would have to, we think it should have a BSA special permit. That way our council member could conceivably bring it up and oppose it in a place where we know it's not going to work. And generally the way it used to be when I worked for a council member is, the council member would sort of get their way. That's just kind of the way it was, and if you weren't the council member from that area, like we had a former council member who actually voted against Yankee Stadium, was the only vote one, but that was just kind of a joke vote. But anyway, but it's going to pass. It's not going to pass if usually if that one council member is against it. Then generally people tend to go with it. So I would be in favor of that. I don't know if anybody else has that sort of feeling to request a special use permit, BSA special use permit.
City planning special permit.
Yes.
No. The BSA would make sure it has to get council approval, right? They have the option to give council approval.
I thought it was the other way around.
That's the other way around. It's a CPC special permit.
So that's what we should ask for.
Okay, sorry, I misheard that.
When we take a position on something, we have most weight when our council members
Yes,
supporting.
agreed. Okay, so is anybody, so maybe we should oppose it unless it has a CPC special permit. And it's got to be in a place where there's space, parking, and it doesn't affect, the sidewalk.
Current uses, yeah.
Does that sound about right?
Okay.
Okay. So I've got
So
that.
I understand it's the CPC would be to increase by 50%.
It would be for any increased use, yeah,
Mhm.
any modification, right, so. All right, so 15,
Connor,
O'Connor, go ahead.
Sorry, just quickly, just a flag, because this is actually like, there's a lot of new BSA special permits included in this text amendment. I mean, I tried to like explain them in the notes that I shared with you all. But just this might come up again, like just to flag that this is actually a recurring problem that might come up for other BSA special permits that you might want to advocate become CPC special permits if you decide to. Just letting you know for the future topics.
No, I agree, and that's what I was going to bring up on the last few. So I think 15. So the next few that are sort of all very similar. 15, which is authorization for non-residential uses on large scale campuses. Again, I don't know that would affect us that much per se, but
What about all our night show?
well,
We have a tremendous amount of.
no, sure, I understand that, but that would be a specific thing so there are two things to that, is that it would affect us, but so George, how could we state that we want to make sure that NYCHA residents got some of the same consideration as other residents, but that's in terms of occupations, right? And what else, where is NYCHA treated differently under this new ways? So for example, there are some things that might affect NYCHA and not affect NYCHA.
Well, so NYCHA is not picked out specifically in this at all. It's just whether it's a large campus or not, right? And so a lot of large campuses are NYCHA, but not all of them. And so it would affect all of from a zoning perspective, it would affect all of the large campuses the same way. And so you have this authorization, which essentially, we should talk about authorizations for a second, because you don't see them that often. They are essentially city planning, they're discretionary action from city planning. And they essentially say you could do something that you otherwise can't do, right? And they do ask you for your opinion, but you're the only one that they ask. They don't hold a public hearing. They don't ask the council member. They just ask the community board. And so, what my problem with these two is that, the small retail in residential districts, the relatively small retail or office on campuses, is that these are really local decisions, and they really need to be made by local people. And the City Planning Commission is not local. It's a citywide body, often with people from other boroughs, populated mostly by people from other boroughs who maybe have never even been to your district. And it just seems to me to be a mistake to have, even though these are small items, right? These are small stores or small establishments. It's just, it's who should be making those decisions. It's more philosophical than practical. It just seems to be the wrong body for it, in my humble opinion.
No, I agree, and that's why I think one of our general points will be, again, there are some things that are included in this that maybe shouldn't be, for a variety of reasons, and particularly because they're local decisions.
If we had a different planning commission that deferred to the community boards on these, or like said, well, this is what the community board wants, and then essentially only in exceptional situations did something different, I think that would bring a lot of people more comfort, but we don't have a planning commission like that.
Okay, so I guess, so maybe we should request on 16, the thing On 15 and I think even 16 and 17, they're all sort of similar. I kind of feel like we should ask for a CPC special use permit in all of those to make sure that there is a local decision. If that makes sense to people. They're all sort of similar in that. Go ahead, Susan.
I would think that anything on a NYCHA campus, which is a lot in our area, would have to be approved by the residents.
Yeah.
Which is different than a CPC, because it's just not just coming to the community board.
And as George has mentioned, there are other campuses that have the same sort of setup with small retail. Knickerbocker and more.
Right, and so that's the thing, we're trying to basically oppose them to slip things through, right? I mean, I think the thing we want is, we want to recommend that local things are decided by local bodies.
So
that are relevant.
What would our comments look like?
So the general comment would be, in general, we think the zoning is overly broad and, in a lot of places, they're trying to make changes to the entire city when that doesn't make sense for the entire, that's a general comment. Not one size doesn't fit all. And then for a very specific local situation, there should be, the local body should have input into deciding whether or not that change is made. Right, does that make sense? In whatever form we could get that, whether it's a city council, or in this case, it's a NYCHA residence.
And say on any residential campus.
Yeah, residential campus, yeah, the residents should, and usually the residents can vote, right? On some of these types of things. Whether go public or private or whatever,
Yeah, they're voting on a lot of stuff.
Right, okay, so. And so in that way, I think, George, isn't sort of like 15, 16, and 17, they're all sort of like they're trying to get away from local input. And that's something that I think we should oppose.
Can you list what?
I wouldn't have.
Sure, so 15 is, George, can you just quickly explain 15?
Sure, 1 second, let me pop it up here. In front of me, there it is.
Non-residential.
Authorization for non-residential uses on large-scale residential campuses. Okay, so, like NYCHA campuses, they're almost all zoned for only residential. They don't have commercial overlays. So if you want to put a supermarket on a NYCHA campus, you can't. And so the idea here is that you could have a, office stores, even production uses, anything that could go into a C1 or a C1 and C2 district, on a NYCHA campus in a residential zone, as long as whatever you're putting there is no larger than 15,000 square feet, which isn't that big, and the campus is at least 1.5 acres in size. And so, it's essentially, it gives some flexibility to that campus to add things that are not residential uses to it, or community facilities, which you could already do there. And it does this through this authorization process with the City Planning Commission. Again, that's this process that doesn't go to the council member. They ask you, but only you. And
Right.
there's no public hearing.
So,
And 16 is sort of similar, right? And it's not exactly similar, but it's corner stores, but
Yep.
it needs
is
like,
almost the same, right? They could have been the same authorization, but they put them as separate authorizations. This is just for much smaller spaces, but really anywhere.
exactly. And I think, again, we want local, again, it would be the same reason we oppose it is that we want local say over local decisions, right? That's the corner stores. I mean, again, I don't think corner stores is really an issue in our neighborhood.
I don't think it'll affect us at all.
It won't affect us at all, but I think we should oppose the fact that it's just a general opposition to the fact that we think that local decisions be made locally. Does that make sense to anybody else?
Yeah.
Does that?
With the campuses, I mean, to be able to have some of those commercial might be a very good thing. I mean, there are a lot of large campuses.
Oh, yeah.
But You're right, I mean, if the residents wanted it.
Yeah, if the
also-
residents want
It
it.
also might help, provide revenue stream for NYCHA. So it's like, the idea of having them is very good, it's the process. You know, I would wanna specify that the concept of allowing it, or the flexibility, is a good thing. The process must include, you know, local support,
Right.
local input and support.
Would that process though be, wouldn't it be required anyways for those campuses to approve whatever the lease is?
No, they're saying no, but.
No,
I mean, it would allow the zoning, but that land would be owned by them, so don't they have to approve it anyways? Isn't it their own spaces or even if
The
it's
residents
not
wouldn't get any say whatsoever, it would only be city planning.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
But the land is owned by city planning, like the lease would have to be formed by someone, right?
Well, the NYCHA land is, what is it? I don't know, who owns NYCHA land? It's federal government owns it.
Right.
So the person making the decision to lease it is who? If they had.
It depends on what it is. Right now, they're having a lot of, you know, some are going PAC, some are going RAD, and they're allowing the tenants to decide and make decisions. So there's absolutely precedent for tenants to make decisions on NYCHA property.
Right. And so anyway, do we sort of agreed on 15 and 16, the same thing? They're basically sort of the same thing. One is residential campuses. The second one, obviously residential campuses, we will want residents to approve it. I don't know if we feel strongly about, I doubt a council member would go against residents. I'm not sure we need council members involved. Does that make sense on 15? Which is the the residential campuses.
Well, and right now they aren't, right? The residents are making the decision.
Yeah, so we'll leave it up to the residents, which is I think what the council members probably want anyway, 15. For 16, again, I think we should just, it doesn't affect us, but again, I think we should support, oppose it, or we should recommend that the change would be to, you know, it needs local support, it's a local decision.
Let me ask George a question. Let's say a developer wants to build a property or a tower on a NYCHA campus, like they had done before. And one of the things that they wanted to do was to put a supermarket in there. Now, originally, if they wanted to build the tower, the council member had no weight because they were allowed to build. If they put a supermarket there, that would now trigger a ULURP, which would give the council member input on the proposed proposal. Do we lose that ability now?
That's a really interesting point. You're right, because what this is a pathway for a commercial use without a rezoning and without ULURP and without the council member. You're exactly right to thinking.
That's the only fear I have, because that was what happened at LaGuardia, and we were trying to get them to put a supermarket in, mainly, now that it's over, to trigger a ULURP so that the council member could weigh in, because we had no other way to say no other than that. But that's, I'm not trying to start a whole new discussion, but that's the only thing I would be concerned about.
But if the residents had to say, do we need the council member?
For the
For 15.
Oh, this isn't. Yeah, for 15. If the residents have the final say, why do you need the council member?
I'm not saying that you do or don't, I'm just saying that that's where you lose the council member's ability to, because you could trigger you. I'm not, that's just a comment. Because in the LaGuardia case, there was no other way to defend it, other than triggering the ULURP.
But they weren't going by the LaGuardia residents' decision. Right. That's the difference.
Right.
This would instead say it's up to the LaGuardia residents.
Yeah, I think if we residents decide that they like it, I think that'd be great. Connor, go ahead.
Yeah, just the one point is, I mean, I agree with what you're saying. There isn't, the issue is like, there's no mechanism within zoning to require tenants approve of a commercial use. The reason that people defer to a special permit is that it triggers, it does have a mechanism for council approval, which in the same way we talked about council weigh in reflecting what the community board wanted, it would reflect what the tenants want. You know what I'm saying? So just flagging that there's no like mechanism within this text amendment unless that exists that would allow tenants to approve commercial uses. That would be a decision by NYCHA to create a process like that, similar to what they did with PACT.
So what you're saying is the comment that we were going to make would be dismissed, really.
It's just to think about. I just wanted to make that point. Like, I think it's a fair point and should be advocated for, but just in terms of what the sort of the scope of the zoning can require for this kind of commercial use.
So I think we could say as a backup is that we believe that some device should be something, we believe the resident should have say. If that's not the case, then it should revert to a CPC special permit that would give the council member the right to say. Does that make sense? It's kind of like a backup.
Yeah.
To let them know that we're trying to figure out a way to make local decisions local, as opposed to CPC or BSA shoving it down our throat. Right? Everybody sort of agree those. So I think that's sort of the same on 16 and 17 for this, or sorry, for 15 and 16, that's sort of the same thing. I think we should be basically saying that local decisions should have some local input, whether it's residents or council members or whatever, to be able to oppose these things. 17 is actually, I don't think 17 necessarily would affect our district, George, but I think it's the same thing. We should be opposing it because it could have some crazy consequences, right?
Well, yeah, and I wouldn't want to say that it won't affect your district because it's essentially this is the one where that they talked about film studios, if you remember their deck, and the idea that film studios sometimes have bulk requirements that don't fit into zoning really well, and so what do? So this is the solution to buildings that have needs that don't fit into our zoning well. It's an authorization, so it's easier for them to get a waiver as opposed to going and getting variance or rezone. Fine, but this is offered to anyone who wants it, right? You don't have to demonstrate a need for it. Essentially, you just have to demonstrate the willingness to go through the process to get a waiver for bulk. And what do I mean by bulk? So if you want to go taller, if you want to cover more of the lot, that's what you're going to see more often. It's like you don't want to have a rear yard because you need a big footprint. You don't want to have a setback from the street because you need a big floor plate. Or you could actually have it so that you can get waivers for height because you want a taller building. And that's the thing that concerns me. I think there is legitimate needs for legitimate uses to get these waivers, but that's not a part of the authorization application. It's not, when you look at the findings, the conditions and the findings, demonstration of the need is not one of them. So that means any use can come in and ask for this. And so it's always hard for me to imagine what developers or what people may do in the future, right? So I don't want to say it's not going to affect your district.
So it could, yeah.
But we should just outright oppose that. I mean,
I think we should oppose it. And again, I think it would be the same sort of thing. It would, if it did affect our district, it would be a local decision, right? I mean, we wouldn't want to make it as of right. You could do whatever the hell you want. Right. The wave a magic wand, do what you want doesn't make any sense. So I think we would say that we oppose it. And again, we would want to see, a CPC permit that the council member could, have say on. Does that make sense? So I think they're all sort of the same thing. We're saying the same sort of thing because, again, what's going to wind up happening is it's, they're passing something that's a seriously large hammer, and then they don't want you to be able to, do anything but take the hammer on the head. you know? I don't like taking the hammer on the head.
So I would be specific though, you know, we think that there are some uses that, you know.
There might be legitimate
there's-
uses.
That there might be, it is the lack of any community input.
Right,
And,
yes.
and the lack of demonstration of need.
Yep, agreed, right. Okay, and then like 18 is just like, why? Why do we even have 18 if there's no place it's gonna be put? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. So 18 is zoning districts for future mapping. I mean, this seems like, you know, let's create a Harry Potter wand, even though we don't have the spell yet.
Well, if I may, I mean, as a zoning person, I have struggled because, you know, you have 3 manufacturing districts that go between 2 and 10 FAR, right? You have a 2, a 5, and a 10. You have nothing in between. And there's a big difference between 5 and 10 FAR, right? And there are sometimes when you want to have nuance, and our zoning was made without nuance, especially in the manufacturing zones. It's just like, yeah, whatever. And so making new zoning districts, and the way they've done them is, you know, there are these new zoning districts which mimic loft forms, and they have lots of different gradations between them. As somebody who's been saying, well, yeah, we really need a zoning district like this to fit that form, and then realize it doesn't exist, it's frustrating. And so I actually think that this was something that came out of people who are, you know, essentially more technical, saying, I wish I had this tool back then, and now I will have it going forward. I actually think it's, you know, again, it's a technical thing. It really is not really something for, you know, you all, it doesn't affect you all at all. But I think it was a smart thing for them to consider.
So how would these special districts get approved then?
Well, they wouldn't be special districts. They're just, you know, they're new zoning districts. So there would be a ULURP that happens, and then these new zoning districts would get mapped. And again, they're both, the C and the M are both non-residential use, non-residential districts. And so they're really designed for the industrial areas or the central business districts. They're really not designed for your area, but
right.
You know, it's just another tool in the citywide toolbox.
Sounds like we don't need to comment on it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we do, but I don't know. It seems so odd. I mean, I can understand where they'd want to do it for, you know, let's say our central business district is in a situation where we have all these office buildings and, hey, nobody wants office buildings anymore and they need to change those. I could understand that. I assume that's what they kind of want to do, basically, or?
Again, it's a different building envelope that has more nuance in density. It has a different shape that's boxier, that fits a loft building, that's a high coverage building. And you know, our current zoning now really requires sky exposure planes and going up into, you know, allowing a lot of light and air to reach the street. But sometimes the existing buildings, you know, think Soho NoHo, these big blocky buildings, they don't fit that. And so they made zoning districts to fit Soho NoHo style buildings. That's it.
Okay. So, I mean, I don't have any thoughts on this. Anybody have any thoughts on it, or aside from it just seems
I think
weird?
we should focus on what we need
Okay.
to focus on. I think there's at least 15.
Yeah, no, there's way more that we need to focus on, obviously. So let's actually get to some of these. So we'll start with one. Actually, I wanted to just quickly talk about, again, I had 4 general things that I wanted to that I think would be good for us to talk about in general. One would be that there's a constant tension in this rezoning between commercial and residential. And that, why not wait to do both at once, these particular situations, to do them both at once, given that you're gonna favor commercial and then suddenly you're gonna redo housing, and you've already kind of hosed yourself, in a sense, you backed yourself in a corner. So to me, it would seem to make sense to do them both at the same time, given that there's a tension all throughout many of these. Does that sound like a general good idea, or?
Is that something you can even?
Yeah, they're not doing it. I agree with you. It makes total sense, but that's not the way they're doing it.
No, but.
This has already been certified out.
No, I understand that, but we could still make a comment about it.
Well, we can make a general comment.
Yeah, it's a general comment that it's a mistake to do it this
It's
way.
not gonna affect anything.
Understood, but, I mean, you don't think we should make general comments then, or?
Nothing wrong with it.
I mean, if people don't want to make general comments, we don't have to, but,
I have no opinion on that.
okay. Does anybody care whether we make general comments or not, or very specific comments on? Because I think we should make.
I would say you should make general comments, especially if it deals with the process. Or, you should have done, both of these at the same time or something like that, because, if they don't get feedback that they're screwing up, they'll just continue to screw up.
So you think we should do it? That's your opinion?
Yeah, I do. I mean, ultimately, it's not for this application. It's for the next application and the one after that.
Right. How do people feel about this? Should we make general comments?
We can make general comments. How many more do we have left?
So we've got, to discuss in general, we've got, just go back. And we may, the thing we could do is obviously come back to this because we are going along, as you would expect, because we've got 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9,
Wow.
10, 11. We have a lot actually.
So let's set a goal because it's quarter to
Tell them.
9.
So yeah, we can certainly stop, and then come back to it. One of the things that we could also do is come to some general consensus on certain things. And then we could ask someone to write up something as a basis to start discussion. So we have a baseline for discussion to create a resolution, maybe assign work or something, or people who want to volunteer to do work.
I think we're gonna need a draft resolution for next time. You
Right.
can always change it, but I think you need a real draft resolution for next,
You see tonight or?
in January.
No, we'll need one, so.
You need to come to the meeting in January with a draft resolution.
Oh,
with
agreed.
real- With real language.
So I think we should give folks homework to a certain extent. George and Connor give us some great comments. I didn't get a chance to read them all, but I think we should, most of them I think we're going to agree with. So I think we should take some homework because I don't know if we would finish this even in January with that.
Well, we have to go in June.
No, if we're gonna do it the way we're doing now, I don't know if we finish in January going over every single one. And then come up with a draft resolution. I think we need to have a draft resolution in place.
Yeah.
this tonight.
But if you don't.
Yeah, no, we
if
just
you
sent
don't
it, I sent it
have
tonight, yeah,
a
we just got it,
concept
so.
of what the committee's
I
gonna
don't?
support, what they're
Uh-oh.
not, you can't
Sorry.
really draft the resolution. You need to at
That's
least
my mistake,
know
I
what do you wanna support or what do you
Right.
not wanna support. Or at least a straw poll of what you wanna support or not support. Which I think the ones you've gone over, you could just do it more quickly.
Tonight?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're gonna have to go through this quickly.
So we could go through it quickly. Sorry, I guess.
That's okay, that's okay. She's.
My apologies.
I mean, otherwise you're not.
So we could go quickly, and they are sort of kind of quickly. One is obviously the grandfather thing. So the question is that as I had stated when I wrote the little notes I'd sent out, like CB3 had previously been against grandfathering. Obviously there are a lot of places that are grandfathered, and we understand that it's unlikely that they'll be converted back, but the problem with them is that it actually winds up drawing businesses from the avenues onto the side streets, and so that's sort of the concern. And the expansion of that would be kind of a problem. Go ahead, Susan.
Hold on, why does it draw businesses from the avenues to the side streets?
Because they're cheaper.
Yeah, but the avenues have the street traffic. And more.
Sure, but I mean.
Commercial places want to be on the avenue because they have the street traffic. That's why it's more expensive. So you're going cheaper, but you're getting less foot traffic. So I'm not sure if that's an accurate
So,
conclusion.
so actually it was Steve that brought it up last month, that even though he was opposing it, that the side streets would be less expensive, I believe.
No, they are less expensive, but they have less foot traffic.
That's absolutely true, and, because so many people can't afford the rents on the avenues.
Right.
They are going to the streets. So if I could I'll try to be really brief. The number where CB3 is number 2 in the city with commercial nightlife complaints. The non-conforming use on side streets under people's bedroom windows are what causes conflict. And it's such a huge issue, and our community board spends way too much time on it, I will tell you, that I would suggest that you can't ignore this issue for the residents. Also, we have vacancies on this avenues, so I don't know why we would want people to use non-conform, why we would encourage people to use non-conforming use when we have vacancies on our avenues. We don't have foot traffic on our avenues, or some of them, the further east ones, because they're either vacant, because we've done studies on this, which are on our website. They're either vacant or they're nightlife and they don't open till 5 p.m. So we do know that people say, I'm not gonna open here because there's not enough foot traffic. So for those reasons, I don't think there's any good side. If the city were willing to be flexible, Gail Brewer at one time introduced a low impact commercial bill that would allow low impact on side streets so that you could have a deli open 8 o'clock, that sort of thing. Unfortunately, CPC is not willing to be flexible and look at that kind of low impact use.
Yeah, I mean, for places that are already existing, I don't see a problem with low impact. Particularly, so there are a lot of places that they're trying to now allow. So if you go to like the ones with occupations, there are a lot of people who are gonna open a business in their apartment now, instead of, professional businesses, but then we'll get into this later, but they're professional businesses that might actually open an avenue, or they might, if it were just an office like that, they might open on a side street, which would be fine, they're low impact, right? I mean, a real estate agency is low impact, but.
What we're saying is, no existing business is gonna be impacted, no one's gonna have to leave. The only places that would be impacted are those that are already vacant for over 2 years.
Right.
Right, sorry.
Connor's had his hand up for a while.
Oh, you should.
Go ahead.
Connor, good. You went white instead of.
Connor, did you wanna speak?
I don't think that.
That's
Oh,
not
that's-
a
that is-
man.
That's an
Yeah.
It's a person.
It's Stop funning around, Connor. Yeah, go ahead, Alistair.
I think that from what I'm hearing here is people don't mind the stores on the side streets. They add to the.
If they're low impact, right.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say, as long as they're not bars, nightlife.
Right.
And a nightlife type of store. To me, the side streets and the stores are a character of the East Village and part of New York history. And those stores existed there originally, in many of the places. I think eliminating the stores just because we have a bar problem is a shame. And it would be nice to find a way to allow the stores and not have the bars there. I don't know how to do that. I do not think it's a simple matter of thinking if you get rid of the commercial use because it hasn't been occupied for 2 years, it's going to resort back to a residential use. And the reason for that is twofold. One, it's extremely expensive to convert. And landlords these days are very short on funds. They will let the place go dark. And now it's gonna have a negative impact altogether because you're gonna have the dark space. It's neither gonna be commercial, it's neither gonna be residential. It's gonna cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to convert a space like that into a residential space. The other thing is a lot of those places don't have light and air for a residential space. So it's very, very difficult, maybe impossible to make those spaces into residential. So now again, you're gonna have landlords that maybe even if they want to do it, they're not gonna be able to do it because of the lack of light and air. So I'm a big proponent of leaving the stores as stores, but I agree that we don't want the bars and the nightlife there. So I'm for prolonging the grandfather because I think that's originally how the village was, how this neighborhood was. And I think by imposing the 2-year limitation and eliminating stores, you're gonna have a lot of just dark spaces go dark. And that's gonna be counter to our goals.
Go ahead.
I have a point of clarification. So my understanding is that it would preserve the grandfathered stores that are currently like filled, and that in the future it wouldn't put this 2-year limitation. So it's not really, is it really expanding the amount of stores that are grandfathered? It's just preserving the current stock. Is that correct?
That would be correct.
It's
Yes.
grandfathered, so we have a tremendous amount of grandfathering, I'll show you. So it affects our community more than, I think we're number 2 in the city.
And so
It's not increasing the stores. I think that's. what the
yes, we're
question
not increasing. However, so this is, you can pass it around, this is the 2 of them, they got CB3. What it's doing, right now, we have serious problems. I mean, what Alistair says makes total sense, except we don't have that option. Keeping stores and not having 4 AM bars. So right now, because we have so many grandfathered, you see the sheds all up and down, every one of those is a grandfathered, non-conforming. Every one of those is non-conforming. So if a place is not rented and it becomes like 189 East 3rd Street as a current example, terrible bar for many, many years. It has now been vacant over 2 years, and they were gonna rent it to another bar. I actually had an audit done and stopped it because it's been vacant over 2 years. So it would no longer allow us to rescue those places. And in most of New York City, few places, it doesn't matter. In ours, the sheds show you how much it impacts us. Every one of those sheds on a side street is potentially 4 AM, either R or potentially 4 AM bar on a side street, one after another after another. Wow. So we're saying the ones that are not rented would be rescued. And I believe, George, you had mentioned on the Upper West Side that there had been places that had gone from commercial to residential, and some of them were previously residential, some were not.
It's rare because it is expensive. Everything that was said earlier is exactly right. But I will also say is that community facilities could reoccupy those spaces. So like doctor's offices, and they do that sometimes. But again, it is even that is not common.
So it could become cultural, and you got a doctor's office.
Doctor's office, daycare, that sort of use, any sort of.
But if the nice boutique stores go out of business, or the little cafes that are nice and add to the character, those can't go back either. So we're kind of.
They can, not vacant for 2 years.
No, but if they're vacant for 3 years, say another COVID hits, something happens, they're vacant for 3 years. We've then eliminated all those
COVID
little
will not
stores.
do it because they gave an exception for anything that was vacant because of COVID. So an emergency like that does not, will not have an.
I think I think my concern would be that it has served its purpose, right, where we were able to use it as a loophole of sorts to get rid of bad actors. But I do think it would impact a lot of the businesses that aren't, right, that aren't necessarily bars, that make up a lot of the East Village and Lower East Side as well, at their expense to get rid of the opportunity to make it a permanent.
It's not impacting any existing business.
They would have to go out of business.
They would have to, on their own, go out of business, and then the place remain vacant for over 2 years. It will not impact any business.
I guess it would impact a bit the character, right, where a lot of what East Village is a lot of shops, a lot of, you know, stores, fronts that are these like kind of small hole in the walls. What would that be replaced with, right? I mean, there's only so many doctors' offices.
How many, so what you're saying is how many of those are gonna go out of business and stay vacant for over 2 years?
I mean, I can't say, right, but is it something that we should be factoring in when we make a decision on whether we can grandfather these stores permanently or not?
Well, you should factor in everything you think is important. What I felt obligated, because my job is to report community concerns to the board. And so I have therefore, there is overwhelming complaints by community, which are documented by 311s. So I'm reporting this to you and I'm saying, you know, part of, at least somewhat of what you can consider should be what you hear from the community. And now that George says that they could be used for community facilities, which I didn't realize, to me, you know, particularly if they're lower cost, that would be the best of all worlds to be able to have an art studio, a daycare, you know, a doctor.
I think there's another way too. We could, I mean, there's a couple suggestions we could make. One would be that we're okay to sort of expand community use as long as, again, it's low impact. Whether it, you know, it's not it's a business that would have a hard time surviving actually on an avenue, but it doesn't really require, you know, something like a daycare or whatever that actually probably needs a cheaper space, something along those lines. The other thing we could maybe suggest too would be to actually have a, given that it is a residential street, we should actually have it limited to like residential hours so that a business.
Can't do that.
Why can't the zoning do that?
Because we asked last time and they will not put hours into the zoning. That would solve all the problems in the world, but they will not do it.
But they're redoing the whole zoning.
But they said
text.
they,
So if
I
we
mean,
ask for it,
you could ask for Jeff, they will not do it.
It's illegal. It's illegal.
They won't do it here in New York City. That would solve every problem in the world if we could do that, but we can't.
We could ask. I mean,
We did ask.
we could ask for environmental considerations, right? Like noise.
So, you know.
Right? Could we ask for an environmental consideration?
How likely is that to happen?
It's not likely to happen, but you can ask for it. I mean, they added environmental considerations for adding commercial uses on the same floor or above residences, but really they did as little as they as the environmental assessment required, right? It wasn't something that they did voluntarily. They just did it so they didn't have to do a full EIS. And so it's the kind of thing that they do under duress.
So
I mean, that's a logical thing. I mean, we're kind of screwed if we don't say anything, right? And if we give something that's absurd, they're not going to listen to it. But environmental concern is like, maybe, right?
Maybe.
They just created open dining till midnight on the same street, so they're not, I mean, that's not where the city's going.
No, but I mean, the thing, an environmental concern would be about noise after a certain, could be about noise if it creates too much noise.
There's already a law about noise.
Well, I understand that, but,
Then you get it, and how do you enforce noise? And the reality is you can't.
How about this? We're spending a lot of time on
Yes.
this.
Yeah.
It's already
Why don't you
9:02.
just drop holes?
I don't know if we're gonna get through all of these tonight. But for this particular issue, I think there's I don't know where we feel about grandfathering it, whether we want to keep it or not, but do you think we should take a straw poll at this point?
Absolutely, because I mean, everything's been said that's gonna be said, right? You
Yeah.
guys just gotta come to some kind of decision so that when you write your resolution, you know where you're going.
Because the concern is, from what you hear, that that's a way to keep out bars and bad actors and return to residential or community use.
Yeah.
And we lose that capability if we agree with what's in the
Right.
Whereas some are saying that we're gonna lose some of the sort of flavor of the East Village if we don't allow some of the shops to come back. Although I need to see examples of the analysis.
But there's another thing too, though. Couldn't they actually expand the use of it? So for example, obviously they already have community facility, right? Couldn't they, for example, they wanna, add micro delivery places? Why couldn't it be a micro delivery place? Like does it really matter that there's a dark store on a side street that's actually makes a landlord happy? And it's not a nightlife?
I don't know, but the thing is, they're allowing use groups 3, which was no community facility, so it's not gonna be empty, it's not gonna be dark.
George had a comment which I couldn't see.
Connor just raised his hand.
Hey Connor, go ahead.
So what I want
Yeah, George and I are talking in the chat about this. We mentioned that you can request a restriction of uses for non-conforming commercial spaces. So that would apply to spaces that would be grandfathered. They're considered non-conforming commercial spaces. You can, like as George says, suspend discontinuance except for specific uses like eating and drinking establishments or other uses that you think would be particularly just create disturbances for the residential area.
It's illegal to actually just to say no alcohol. I don't know if that's in the zoning. I think it actually might be. It came up actually with the Two Bridges stuff. You can't discriminate against alcohol.
Well, that wouldn't be discriminating against alcohol. Zoning doesn't do that. It just says eating and drinking places, and it's restaurants and bars, whether they serve alcohol or not.
So what was the wording on that again?
You do eating and drinking, that solves.
Eating and drinking establishments is the specific use type that includes bars and restaurants.
Right.
Yeah, we're against eating and drinking because of rats.
Yeah, it's essentially, they're suspending the discontinuance or getting rid of discontinuance, except you could keep it. Or you could say you're okay with suspending it, except for eating and drinking spaces. So if it goes dark for 2 years, you could refill it with a use group 6, but not an eating and drinking space.
Problem with that. That's me.
I have no problem with that. I don't think city will ever
So can we
accept it,
straw
but-
poll on that? Because no one's gonna change it.
All right, yeah, let's have a straw poll on that.
On what we just said now. but
Just we just said that, yeah.
Alistair, you're gonna be present, not voting, because you're the landlord.
We're landlord technically.
Oh.
But we kind of think we know where you're going. Yeah, but, yeah, let's take a straw poll. All in favor?
Well, we got a statement we're all in favor.
Right, we're
So,
in favor.
somebody want to make a statement?
Well, what's the language you wrote?
What's the language you guys wrote?
I wrote, you suspend the discontinuance in grandfathered areas except for eating and drinking establishments.
I'm okay with that in the comments that we write to CPC. And if others are in favor, we can straw poll and raise their hands.
I'm in second that. I'm in favor of that.
So we can get a straw poll, it's not like a.
Yep.
Right, yeah, okay, so that's where you'll go on it.
Okay, so we're okay with that.
So, okay, so we'll write that in, and then obviously we'll vote on it next time. Somebody will write that in and we'll vote next time. All right, let's try to move quickly if we can. 2 says not an issue. 3 is allow manufacturing uses to locate in commercial zones. I mean, I think that I think some manufacturing would be fine, like dressmaking, you wanna do dressmaking, fine, I mean, there are some things that are not, they would be fine, you know, clothing and soap, but, you know, there's some other things that are really, I think would be a problem, like, you know, metal I mean, you know, George has a really good list in his thing of, you know, machinery manufacturing, fabricated metal producing, electrical lighting manufacturing, textile mills, creating medical equipment, that seems problematic.
You wanna do like support with restrictions and then.
Yeah, so I think we should just support with restrictions and then limit some things that are clearly
Yeah.
I mean, we don't need like basically, I think the term George uses is right, it doesn't serve the neighborhood,
Right.
right? I mean, does that make sense?
Yes and no. I'll give you an example. There's a better boiler that does boiler welding on First Street, which I guess is manufacturing. You would think it doesn't serve the neighborhood, but we use them a lot to fix boilers, and they're local, so they can get there quickly. So some of these uses might have some assistance to a neighborhood. For example, you know, welding or some type of boiler repair, if it's local rather than some guy coming in from Queens, which takes time.
I think we're focused.
Well, what I would say that would be a repair, like precision craft and repair to serve the industry, serve the local area, or manufacturing uses that serve the local area. And really the key is who the customer is, as opposed to, you know, what exactly they're doing. I think, you know, in my humble opinion, it's do you all benefit from this? And that's what neighborhood commercial districts are for.
Yeah, the problem is that we're not sure. And how do we, I mean, we're not sure what we want to oppose, and there's now going to be a blanket as of right. Does it, and they, in theory, they do have to take the environmental concerns into, right, George, or no?
Yeah, there are environmental concerns with these if they are low. Yes, they have to meet light manufacturing standards, performance standards, and if they locate on the same floor or above a residence, there are additional performance standards they need to meet for sound, air quality, and vibration.
Yeah, it'd almost be.
So can't you just say, you know, that you're for it with, if it serves a local, you know, those.
Yeah, we can. I mean, I personally would be opposed to it if it were next to, some of the manufacturing stuff were next to a residential, or that's in another section though, right? I mean,
Yes.
I would be opposed to like metal manufacturing if it's right next to somebody else's apartment, because it's gonna be very hard to, it's gonna be very hard to actually soundproof that, to environmentally do it.
So wouldn't that be under the environmental concerns? That would be restricted
Hopefully.
because of environmental concerns?
Well, no, they could, so. Here's my concern is that they would, my concern is that they would actually do construction in that site to make it quote unquote, they would actually bother residents so much that the residents may want to move.
Because of the construction?
Yeah, you've never heard of that before?
Well, we have construction all the time.
No, I understand that, but this is construction that wouldn't have ever happened before.
So you've got to come to a
No,
decision.
I understand, I'm just saying, like, what are people's thoughts? I definitely would, I'm not sure I'm in favor of it personally, but.
It's a tough one because it's hard to think of.
Yeah.
The repercussions.
Yeah, I mean, it's, and the other problem too is that if you do allow it, we know there's not enforcement, so.
Well, but if you allow it with restrictions and, you know, mentions other restrictions or criteria of restrictions, then you wouldn't get to the need for enforcement.
Okay. George, is there like a simple list of the general environmental restrictions somewhere in the document, or?
Yeah, well, okay, so the light performance, the light industrial performance standards are one thing, and then there's the the three environmental standards if you're in proximity to a residence. That is a section which I pull out in one of the other bits where I complain about it because it only applies to small, it does not apply to small uses. It's which is kind of crazy because it needs to apply to all uses, whether it's large or small. If it's loud, it doesn't really matter. So there's improvements that need to be made there, and I can, I think if you talk about it generally, we could get you the proper language to put in whatever resolution.
So I agree with that because it is mentioned in the later one. What, you remember what number that is offhand? It's like,
It's where they're on the same floor. Allow
Right.
commercial uses above, that's number 5.
5, right. So I think if we use the standard for 5 to fit with this, I would be fine for that. And the thing that George points out that is a problem, and I agree, is it's not the fact that it's a small business. It's how loud the business actually is a problem. And so, let's see, what was your solution to that, George, about that? You would want to actually have the environmental standards?
Yeah, I mean, what you do is you take away the size restriction. I think that's just a mistake. That's a drafting error that they put in here without somebody thinking about, you could be small and loud. And I think it's just a fix that they just need to fix it.
Okay, so what's the language we would use to actually ask to fix it? Would be to
have it apply to all establishments as opposed to just larger establishments.
Okay, instead of just small, okay. So the environmental concern would apply to all, even if they're small, right?
Yeah, right. And that section is 32-423, where they detail the environmental standards, and it's essentially.
So this would actually apply to number 5. This would apply to number 5, which is building commercial uses on the second floor or on higher floors that are next to residential.
Yes.
So I think they're both, in a sense, the same thing, that they're going to do it anyway, but as long as we can get the environmental concerns in there, and we get rid of the small thing, then we can actually get enforcement. Does that make sense? Any other bright ideas?
I mean, the one thing I would say is that I would not give up that they're going to do this anyway. I think the introduction of commercial uses in the higher buildings or higher parts of mixed buildings is very anti-housing. And if you get enough housing advocates out on this.
That's a separate opposition, right? That's.
Okay, I get it, right.
So, but just in terms of the environmentals, I would want it to apply to this, right?
Got it, okay.
If that makes sense. So that's actually 3. So the environmental thing that is listed in 5, that George brings up in 5, should also apply to 3, that environmental should apply to businesses whether they're small or large.
Got it.
Yes, can we live with that?
Yeah.
This is going to be a lot. So I think that also works. That's fine. I think that's fine for 3. 4 is the one where to remove loading zone requirements in buildings. I think
existing buildings.
In existing buildings, and I think George sort of nailed it here. Basically, they're trying to solve their. Can you explain the mistake they're making and the way they should fix it?
Yeah, well, I mean, the point is that different types of uses have different types of loading requirements, and sometimes you're moving into a building that is already built. And so, what are you going to do? Add loading docks for a tenant? And they have to actually address this, because if you're allowing manufacturing uses in your office buildings, they require a lot more loading berths in zoning, whether they need them or not. And that's the thing, is that there's no magic number in zoning on loading berths. It was developed in the 1950s, and we're still using the same number, and it's based upon the amount of floor area it uses and what the business does. And so there's no nuance in it at all. My point to this is that their solution is not a good solution, because it will incent people to build buildings with the minimum amount of loading berths, because then they can use more ground floor retail. And then they'll never be out of compliance. But then again, zoning, you don't want a building with 9 different loading berths in it.
So here's the problem with what they're doing, basically in a nutshell, what George just explained. They can actually build a building that is non-compliant in terms of zoning, and the people who they know they're gonna bring in. Once it's actually been built, like, oh, lo and behold, we're gonna have manufacturing here, and they don't have the proper loading zone. And so you wind up with other kinds of problems that can't be solved.
So let me ask you, is this applied to loading docks and loading zones? Because we don't have enough loading zones, we're constantly creating loading zones.
This is only for off-street loading berths. So not loading zones on the street.
Okay.
So what's our comment?
So our comment would be that they should actually right size it in a sense, right? Is that what the language used?
You have to say how.
So basically, here it is. It's in the resident's interest to have the right number of loading berths to keep trucks off the street, but not so many berths that they're unused berths and curb cuts.
Right, and so you can get a waiver from the Commissioner of Buildings right now for loading berths that you can't do because of street layouts. And you could expand that waiver so that you could get it because you don't need it. And I think that's the way, is that there needs to be somebody to say, does this make sense or not? And right now zoning doesn't do that at all.
Right, so basically it's not what they're asking, what they want to offer people is not necessary. It's like in fact, we know it's bad.
Right.
Does that make sense? I mean, to have the wrong sense of loading docks would be literally a bad thing.
Yeah, it's a bad thing, but again, zoning doesn't give the protection. You need somebody to look at it and see what you actually need.
So you're saying you're opposing it and you'll put in reasoning why?
Yeah, they should get a specific waiver from DOB and is it DOB and transportation or both?
It's DOB with it, and they can ask transportation for their opinion.
Okay, so they should go to the appropriate body to get, there's already a process, why are we changing? Right? Or to expand the current process to make sense.
It would be expanding the current process, that's right.
Expand the current DOB process, right? Okay, I think that makes more sense, because I don't think we want to give away an outright thing that is so crazy that we could have unintended consequences of trucks all over the place and, blocking traffic. Does that make sense, everybody?
Yes.
Okay. 5. So 5 happens to be the change in the C regulations where they're going to allow commercial either on the second floor or secondary to residences. Above floors that are next to residents. And the problem for us really comes down to being a nightlife issue.
Also reducing power. Reducing power.
Yeah, I mean, so there are 2 points about this. I mean, the main point really is that it's going to wind up reducing housing. Which is a big problem, and in order to do anything that is going to reduce housing without also changing the housing zoning is wrong, basically. I think. So yeah, there are 2 things. A, that I think we would want to oppose. One would be we'd want to make sure we oppose. So I guess 3 things. We want to make sure that housing isn't affected by this, which we know it will be.
Which goes back to your first comment.
Yes, exactly. So we want to make sure that, if they're going to do something that affects housing, there's a conflict, they should resolve it in the correct way at the same time. B, we also want to oppose the fact that they are waiving environmental things for small businesses, which we know are going to be loud. And C, I don't think we really want to start namby-pambing, allowing, nightlife establishments on second floors, upper floors, rooftops.
Could we put a dead no on eating and drinking
Yes,
establishments?
I would want to put a dead no on eating and drinking.
So at least that's out of the question.
Right.
Because if we ask for too much, they might just.
Yeah,
everything, but if we give specifics, they might.
Yep, and the specifics we can give is the ones we actually already have, right? Are a disaster.
Yeah, I don't think anything where you say except eating or drinking will ever get anywhere. One of the biggest lobby groups is hospitality.
Well, of course, but.
It's not going anywhere. I mean, I'm very pragmatic, that's great, it sounds great, it's just not going anywhere, but you could put it.
Sure, but I mean, we just want to wave the white flag? I don't think it's right to wave the white flag.
No, could be better, that's not me.
Exactly, so I think we have to do something that's reasonable, and the reasonable thing is to, obviously suggestion of making sure that they understand the environmental issues are not limited to small. And obviously there are some, there are gonna be some buildings where you just can't get a second entrance to things. But
Yeah, I think this is gonna be very difficult to do in existing buildings, but maybe more.
New buildings,
in
right?
New buildings, there should be something, because then you can rebuild them.
yeah, I mean, the new build, it's gonna be a huge problem in new buildings. Because it's, it could just be as much as putting in a second elevator, it's only for whatever, right?
Yeah, in the new building, you can have two different entrances, one for commercial, one for residential.
Right. Right, and then they'd be next to each other, and they might be able to soundproof it, but again, they'll get a waiver if it's small business, which is a problem, so.
So we probably have consensus on that.
I think we have consensus on that, yeah. So let's see, 6. Is modernize use groups. So doesn't seem like there's a huge problem on 6, George. But are there any I should have included this before, I forgot to circle this. It doesn't seem like there's anything that's an issue, but what are the unintended consequences we need to be concerned about?
I don't know that there are any. I mean, one of the things that I might say is that, Connor has done a lot of work in terms of mapping changes, and there are some, use groups uses that are industrial uses now, 17 and 18, which, are only allowed in M2 and M3 districts, which are going into, you can now put them anywhere, into 6. It's just that, it just becomes a lot more permissive. And when you see it by individual use, you might go, really? But I don't have actually any individual recommendations. There are still bunches and bunches of uses, each one categorized. It's just that they all get much looser.
So do we have anything intelligent to say about it? I don't have anything.
So you want to not say anything?
Yeah,
Comments? Right.
I think no comments on fine. All right, we did 7, 8 is change how zoning classifies life sciences.
We ignore that one?
I think we can ignore that one, except for I think the whole COVID laboratory thing, I don't think we really want to open up. I mean, I think the one thing we want to be careful about, which George mentioned, is I don't think we really need a high containment research laboratory anywhere in the Lower East Side.
We could probably put a comment in there that's our concern.
Yeah, it makes no sense. I mean, we already had COVID, we've seen this movie before. We don't need to see this movie again. I think that's the only one that really, I think in general, life sciences would be good. For example, if you have a doctor's office.
Yeah, right.
Just put the one comment.
Right.
No COVID laboratories.
Let's move on.
Yep. Okay, 9 would be, nightlife in more places.
No.
So I think in general, we're opposed to that. I mean, I don't think that, as we already stated, the cabaret law doesn't affect anywhere in our district. Right? It's,
Are you talking about dancing?
yeah,
We don't care, well, I think we decided last time that dancing was not an issue.
right,
People don't care, complain, say, oh, so-and-so's dancing.
right.
They complain
Compare
that
about
some
noise.
places very loud and
Mhm.
loud
Right.
outside of the.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so I think that we can pretty much,
Just say no.
we're pretty much opposed to this, we just might need to write some language.
Right, okay.
10, 10, again, the amusements thing, may not affect us. Because I think they're trying to have this really be for central business districts, but I could actually see like creating amusements on a rooftop would be a problem, or creating amusements in an outdoor space. And so, is it, if they do those big ones, the exceptions, are those, do our city council member, is that a CPC special permit that our city council member could oppose?
They are BSA special permits unless they're very large, I think. So BSA can do waivers up to 200% the maximum size, and then after that, you got to go to the CPC.
So what would 200% of the maximum size look like? Do you have any idea?
Well, for in the C1 and C2 districts, that would be more than 20,000 square feet.
Wow.
Are we worried about this happening?
I don't know. I could see it happening. I mean, in an outdoor space or
The only place I could.
a rooftop bar. On a rooftop, I could see it happening, right?
It's allowed on rooftops?
It's, they can do it on a rooftop, right, George?
Okay, so they could do it on a rooftop if the outdoor component of that would have to be an accessory part of an indoor component. So there would have to be like a roof deck with some sort of indoor use.
Okay.
So, I mean, it's designed, the outdoor component is designed for only C7, C8, and M districts, which you don't have, right?
Okay.
So there's the indoor and outdoor, and they are still pretty restrictive on the outdoor.
Okay, so we can skip 10 then.
Okay, good.
I just wanted to know if 10, if there was a problem on 10 that was unintended.
So 10 is skipped, right?
10 we're gonna skip.
Okay, 11, what?
Home occupation.
11 is expanded home occupations.
So for this one, did we decide like foot traffic is something we can include in this or not?
For which one?
For the
Expand
home, expanding home occupations, like could we say that there should be a limit on foot traffic, or is that?
You should limit foot traffic?
Yeah, like can we say that there's limits to foot traffic, like you can't have in your home something that would maybe generate more or less foot traffic?
Well, it's kind of ironic because we were just talking on the other one about wanting to create more foot traffic.
I think her concern is like if you have a home business or something and then you have all this foot traffic
Coming
in the
in and
building.
out.
Inside the building.
Right, but I don't know if
building.
you can do that with zoning.
Okay.
No, probably not.
Well, so part of the problem, what I actually see here is that I would be in general in favor of, Connor, you have your hand up? Go ahead if you want.
I was just gonna say for the foot traffic question, currently home occupations, there's certain uses that are barred from being home occupations. And I think part of that is trying to a basic sort of guide home occupations into uses that are compatible with residential buildings. Like that's why it's all doctors and things like that, because it's not a lot of foot traffic, not a lot of noise, not a lot of goods deliveries, things like that. So it's possible to restrict the kinds of uses allowed in home occupations in order to get at those kind of like quality of life residential issues.
Well, so I've actually got one sort of big problem with this. If they start allowing people who are like, I mean, if you're a veterinarian, you can make a lot of money. It's not like you're.
You do it now.
No, I understand, but if you're a veterinarian, you can make a lot of money. You can actually afford a ground floor space.
But like dog groomers.
Well, dog groomers separate. I mean, that could be. I could almost understand dog grooming. As long as it's not like, I mean, I guess the heavy traffic should be a problem.
All right, what's the concern here, George?
Well, I think, there's multiple concerns. One is people expanding their apartment, meaning like buying the apartment next door to use as their office. And number two, I think is the issue of, you could have 5 people working a barber shop inside somebody's apartment. And so that's a lot of foot traffic that comes in through the building into the, the quasi-public private space of the hallway of the private apartment building. And other zoning codes do limit the amount of trips generated. Like you can generate no more than 5 trips a day or something like that.
What's your concern about foot traffic?
Well, there are people who, so for example, like, I live in Seward Park, and that's like, obviously there's a doorman, or there are door people, the people who buzz you up. You wouldn't have, they could just keep sending people up, like sometimes like, I've got old doors, and you don't always slam the door to close, and your door's still open, and there's, 30 schmucks coming up to your floor.
So what's the recommendation, George, on here?
Well, it's up to you what the recommendation is, but I'm just pointing out that, it's a large increase, right? It's a large increase in the space. It's a large increase in the amount of activity that can occur. And there's no restrictions on uses now. And, you guys got to decide whether that's a good thing or not.
Well, my point is, I don't think it's a good thing. I'm just trying to think.
I don't either. Well,
I think, George, in your comments and your considerations, it says that in other zoning codes that they do limit based on the occupation based on foot traffic. What would that language look like? Is it by type of businesses that they're restricting it?
Yeah, no, as I recall, this is from memory now, is that they either say that they can't have an occupation that generates visitors in like significant numbers of customers. Like you can't have people coming to it. I forget exactly how it is. It's either by trips, like either they use the word significant or a low number. But it's definitely in most zoning codes, it has to do with the amount of traffic generated, and people don't want traffic. And so that's really the key. And I could try to lift some language from somewhere and help provide that to you if you want.
I think the couple things we want to, it's not just, so it's expansion. I think we should, if there's an expansion of the size of the business that's gonna affect housing, that shouldn't be allowed.
So no expansion.
No expansion whatsoever, or if it's a space. So I would also be concerned about people then buying apartments that have already been expanded, right? There's no square footage limitation, right?
That's right. You can keep buying and buying.
So I think we should create it. So I'm concerned that people are gonna, if we say no expansion, they're gonna buy a place that's huge, that's already been expanded, that was previously residential.
So give a size.
So yeah, so I think we shouldn't allow expansion. We should have a square footage limitation. I don't know what that is, but it should be something reasonable.
It's 500 square feet currently. Currently is 1 outside employee and no more than 500 square feet or 25% of the unit size.
I think 2,500 square feet would be way too much, for example. I don't know what the right number is.
Well, what can we use the number of, what was it, 500 or feet?
So let's say 500 times 3 would be 1,500, so maybe that.
No, he said that the max is.
It is currently 500 now, but that's for 1 employee, so maybe reasonably would be maximum square footage would be 1,500.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
That's pretty big, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's really big.
If you think about an apartment, that's 3 apartments.
But if it's not you can't expand it, right?
But still, that would probably be loss of housing because then you would take a whole.
The language also currently is, it's the percentage amount or the square footage amount, whichever is less. So if you have an apartment that's like, you wouldn't be able to make like, if your apartment is 1,600 feet, you wouldn't be able to make 1,500 square feet of it business. It would still have to be the 49% because that's the lesser amount.
Okay, so
Can we just keep the same? Keep the
yeah,
same?
we could keep the same. I'm also concerned about allowing people opening like a stock brokerage or, see, my concern is that they're gonna have, again, there are gonna be unintended consequences where people are gonna have residences, but they're not really residences. Particularly for occupations that don't need it. I mean, I'm happy to have more home occupations for people who can't afford commercial rents.
Must be the primary residence.
Okay, yeah, must be a primary residence.
That's good, yes. Must be
Yeah.
primary.
Yeah, because I'm
That's good.
you know, honestly, if
That's
you're like a stockbroker,
Will not allow.
get a damn office or go get a space and we work.
Yeah, for the design.
Primary residence, fine.
How many do we have left?
We're almost done. That was 11.
Can't be more than 1 or 2.
12 didn't really affect us, right, George? That's the streetscape.
Yeah, it's the urban design rules, and it's essentially imposing new urban design rules, and they're generally pretty good at common sense, transparency, no blank walls. The only thing here is that it's been a citywide, or at least Manhattan-wide, it's going to restrict no dwellings on the ground floor in a commercial district. So you cannot have housing on the ground floor. That's always been an option. Most people don't do it, but some do. And that's going to be like out.
Well, we're skipping that one.
Okay, no
Thank
comment.
you. No comment.
Okay.
Which was the one that actually, sorry, I just had a quick one about this one, but
Okay, go ahead.
the thing was, what was the one that was trying to reduce the residents? This was the one that's actually trying to reduce residential lobbies, right?
Yes, so this will keep residential lobbies smaller too. That's right.
So the only comment I would make on this is that if it's gonna affect housing, it shouldn't be considered now. It should be considered with housing in tandem. Does that make sense? Because it's gonna reduce housing. Does that make sense as an opposition to it?
But this is only in commercial districts.
Right, so it's not gonna reduce.
Let's
housing.
skip this one.
Okay, that's
We
fine.
can always come back, but this is.
I think that's the only next one is 14, that might be it. 14 is explicitly permit micro distribution facilities. This is like one that's controversial because of possible dark stores or
And again, you know, the Department of Buildings is doing this already through a building bulletin. All
Right.
this does is it clarifies the language to implement the building department's interpretation. Though the size that they're permitting in zoning is bigger than what the building department would currently permit today. They're allowing it to be up to 2,500 square feet or up to 5,000 square feet in C4 through C7 districts, or up to 10,000 above that.
So if we oppose it, why would we oppose it? What is the language?
George, what she's saying is if we were to oppose it, our reasoning would be.
The reasoning might be is that these are larger than necessary, and these types of stores sap the vitality of the streetscape and compete with local businesses that need these spaces.
yeah, they don't generate any foot traffic. They're non-foot traffic businesses.
So can we write that down and?
Okay,
That's the answer.
that's the answer. Competes with local businesses. Okay,
All right.
all right. We're good.
Too big. Businesses.
So who's writing this book?
Streetscape.
Are we allowed to share it on Google Docs? No?
What?
You can.
I don't think we can do Google Docs, can we? That's a meeting.
Yeah, get it private meeting.
You can just send your comments.
We could send comments and, right, on each individual.
Yeah.
And you have, if you do.
I don't mind writing it up, starting writing it up, and then,
But why not start writing it up and have people send, I don't think everybody's gonna send comments on everything.
no, they definitely send comments. I'll BCC people.
Okay. Well, I was gonna say to start writing it up, but at the same time have
Yeah.
members send in their comments to be incorporated before you finish.
Yep, that's fine. And, take your time to read George's memo, obviously, and also the stuff that Connor wrote up.
Since we're ending, I have you on, George.
Sorry.
I'm in that C64 region.
Yeah.
And a lot of this will affect C64 regions.
Absolutely. No doubt.
No,
I haven't looked to see where I am.
I mean, it's a small area of East to Lower East Side, but it's significant in its own way.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I'm thinking about in terms of anti-housing is that in those districts, unlike the neighborhood commercial, you can have half the building or 3/4 of the building to be commercial and the rest to be residential. Right now, we just keep it the first 2 stories in a mixed building, unless it's been converted from a non-residential use. So, yeah, I mean, there's potentially big impact there because you could have, nightclubs, you could have amusements, you could have production uses, you could have, it's not just offices anymore, I guess is the point.
Yeah, I know, but that's a discussion for another day, because.
Okay, do we make a motion?
Well, let's thank.
Yeah, I just want to thank George and Connor for everything.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And,
Thank you.
there's some chance we may still want to ask you some questions,
Just
so.
a roll call.
Yeah, we do need to do roll call. It's the same as the,
So let's roll call it up.
roll call's the same as it was at the start.
No, we have to do it, but we have to.
You have
a
to
roll
do it
call.
again.
Physical roll call. Okay, roll call,
Demiris, John,
present.
Ariana, present, Alistair,
Yes.
Herman, Trevor,
Yes.
Laura, Jamie,
Yes.
Sandra,
Yes.
Kate, Megan.
Perfect.
Good night, all.
Sorry for the lengthy, but it's.
Sean, you did a great job.
Yes, you did. Wow, thanks, Francesca.
And thank you, Susan, you and gentlemen, for support.
I mean, that's the thing, is this is such a huge endeavor.